This podcast is part of the Big Heads Media Podcast Network. Go to bigheadsmedia.com for more great podcasts.
Hello and welcome to Body Count, a history podcast where we gab about death and disaster through the ages, highlighting figures, single events, time periods, culture, whatever it may be that resulted in someone, or as is usually the case, a lot of someone's dying. I am your host, Jessica Manor, and I am joined by my two fucking co-hosts.
Bethany Skelton
and Kara DiDemizio signing in.
That's the most joy we've ever had out of Kara saying hello. So I'm already pumped for what we're talking about tonight. But first, guys, as always, housekeeping. That's always going to be here and it's always going to say. So if you love this show, and we are available on all listening platforms, if you love this show, we ask that you go and give us those 5 stars. It really helps us out on the business end of things. It's so important that you all do it. We would really appreciate it.
Unless you
That
don't like
being
us,
said,
just ignore us. If you don't like us,
Yeah.
please don't even bother.
Yeah, please don't bother. We're not worth your time, internet, if you don't care for us. That being said, we are joined today by a guest who's currently making us a special guest. A wall of degrees.
He's got a
wall.
God of tier of guests.
I don't like to brag.
Okay. Then go ahead and introduce yourself, Doctor.
Ladies and gentlemen, I am the ever so humble Dr. Warren Docter, here to give you my very meager and honest and open opinions that in no way are verbose or over the top, and just honest, just easy facts. I'm here to blow your minds.
Can we pause for a second? I have to get my thesaurus if I'm going to be able to follow the rest of this. I can clearly tell I'm going to need it.
Oh my god,
Whoa.
presence of somebody so smart.
Straight from across the pond. He's been re-imported.
Re-imported.
He's back on track. He's focused. And his Twitter bio got more pretentious than it's ever been, guys.
He has that blue check mark, man. Like that blue check mark.
That means he's a
That's right.
person.
Like an actual
I'm a
person.
real human person.
That does
And
not
in
get
no
locked
way
out.
am I a vampire.
An actual human person, Jackie Daytona. So, first things first, go ahead, tell everybody, plug your book, plug whatever you're doing, plug where people can follow you so anybody that turns us off at the end doesn't miss it. I'm forcing you on our audience like you just have to be, like you do to us.
Oh. The daddy of body
Well.
count.
Oh.
The daddy of body count is here. You can follow me at Warren Docter on Twitter. And if you're interested in my work, it's available in all fine bookshops and Amazon. It's called Churchill in the Islamic World, which I wrote. And recently, I've been working on an essay for a good buddy of mine, director Alan Packwood, about Churchill and intelligence and his role, him as a soldier, and the role that he played in experiencing intelligence sort of before intelligence was formalized in 1909.
Did you see that? Kara held your book up to the camera.
Oh, I didn't know she had a copy.
Yeah,
I'll
I got it for
sign
Christmas.
it for you. Yay!
Now I know. Now I need a book plate.
Ask for it to be signed, but I love that you're offering me to.
I need a book plate, man.
Because God knows she couldn't own it in good conscience unless you had, signed it yourself. But
That's true.
Seriously, that is super cool. Honestly, I'm just totally stoked to have you back on because you took me on a hell of a journey the last time.
He always takes women on journeys on body count, doesn't he?
Yes, he does.
Oh, we go exploring. We reach out into a journey through time and space in the bushiest of fashions.
Yeah, I wouldn't have it any other
I'm on
way.
board this carriage.
Smell, color, see, sound, the Warren Doctor way. That being said, like he said, he's not talking about his book. If you want to hear about the book, can go back and listen to the previous series that Warren is on. It does very well in our listener numbers. So
And a nuance
again,
to Churchill, unlike what there apparently has been recently. So that's appreciated. Thank you.
yes.
I do try
Although-
to engage in actual scholarship.
Unlike other people that shall not be named, I suppose.
Exactly. So as you know, that's what we're going to talk about today. He's already stated it. I love that he threw in the director part just to be extra pretentious, but we're going to ignore that.
He's a great man.
He is indeed. That'll never ever listen to this podcast, so God bless him. But you go ahead and start. Where are we starting? What are we doing? How are we diving into this?
And I'll just tell you what I want to sort of look at. So what we're going to be exploring here is Churchill's relationship with intelligence, and this is sort of broad. So espionage and his role, people know that Churchill was a soldier, and people don't know that Churchill's role as a soldier involved a lot of military intelligence, and that these experiences helped shape how he guided intelligence later on in the First World War, and then later, more importantly, in the Second World War, where he becomes hugely important at the center of things like Operation Fortitude South and Operation Fortitude North and Operation Mincemeat and the SOE and the sort of liberation of France. And a lot of the things that happened to him, these lessons that he learned as a soldier, which, by the way, is the name of the essay I'm writing, Learning Lessons, these experiences taught him, Jessica has eye-rolled at me, and I understand why. His lessons. So that's sort of what I'd like to talk about, is his experiences as a soldier, and how he got involved in military intelligence and how these experiences shaped his thinking later on.
Well, because he did a lot. I remember in the episodes that we did, those ended up being series. Might as well just say it was a series with you, Warren. I remember he really was heavily involved in World War I and continued kind of that mentality of, you know what, fuck that noise. I'm gonna actually do something about it. And I always actually thought that was really cool with him.
Yeah, I think the World War I element.
Like he was like in it, like, don't fuck with my country, don't fuck with my freedom, in a sense. Like maybe that, not in the right. Can
I just say I'm incredibly offended? Bethany cannot recall more than 2 facts of all the journeys and things she's been on with me, but she can remember your series. So
she remembers Warren well.
You want to
know Doctor?
You want to know why, Jessica? Because he was nice to me and didn't belittle my comments.
Wow, this turned quick on the Jerry Springer show. Or shall I say the Jessica Manor show.
He loves me more, Jessica. Okay.
Now, that being said, I've always been more intrigued by Churchill's World War I journey, I guess, because for me, it's not what's heavily focused on in the World War II mantra. I get like the World War II exploratory, that is social media. Everyone's always hyper fixated on Churchill as, well, prime minister, but specifically in the guise of the World War II years and how, he kind of rises from the ashes. But I've always been interested in kind of his series of failures, to be honest, and how he learned from them, because that's what people learn and develop from, right?
No, that's absolutely right. And I mean, I'm sure I'm not telling you anything you don't know. Robert Rhodes James wrote a book called Churchill, A Study in Failure, which ends in 1939 before he becomes prime minister. And it sort of imagines him as it looks at his career up to that point as a sort of eccentric guy. And I mean, I think you're absolutely right about the fact that it is so saturated about Churchill in the Second World War. And it's because that's a part of the sort of British identity and the American mythos of fighting the good war and all that kind of stuff. And so Churchill's role as in the pantheon of that has to be quite substantial. But what I find myself is most interesting about Winston Churchill's career is the stuff that happened before. And I focus on stuff even in the 19th century, him as a young man, what shaped him, why does he think the way he thinks? And then we can see how that stuff plays out in the Second War. So that's what's born of this essay that I'm currently working on for Alan Packwood's book, which will be out with CUP. And that is to look at these experiences in the 19th century. And I mean, so we even go back before the First World War. And in many ways, what I'd like to take us up to today it takes us basically up to the Second or the First World War. We don't need to go beyond that to kind of illustrate the points that I'd like to make. And so the first place to say, of course, is to mention that the place to start, I guess, is that, Churchill joined, he went to Sandhurst to get his military education. And most of the military education in those days for him as a cavalry officer focused on them learning how to charge. Now, we think that that's kind of absurd today, right? But in the 1890s.
That wasn't unusual. That was kind of the last hurrah. I mean, up until World War I, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, Doctor, but you don't really see cavalry charges typically used after World War I. I mean, you have it at the beginning of the war, and then artillery and all of these new weapons make it fruitless endeavor. There's a huge ballpark figure, but millions of horses died in World War I too as a result of these.
What's really interesting about the horses is, and the use of a military charge, that all gets played out in the Boer War, which we're going to talk about, between South Africa and the British Empire. Yes.
Okay, so, like, when you say charge, like, are you talking about like a real like charge?
Yeah,
an actual traditional charge.
Oh,
so,
okay.
Exactly, like a cavalry charge.
Okay.
And what's really interesting about Churchill's career is he participated physically himself in the last full cavalry charge at the Battle of Omdurman during the Anglo-Dervish War in 1898.
I'll just say, I would think I've seen reenactments of actual charges, and I would not be down for. I wouldn't. No.
We wouldn't put you on a horse and say, charge?
No, they're all coming. No, I'm good.
But we'll have when we get to the Boer War, we'll explain why those tactics start failing. Now, there are later cavalry charges, and one is attempted in the First World War, but immediately everyone's killed. So you can see that this is a problem. So the place to start here, I think, sorry, my computer, I got an email. The place to start here, I think, is to say that before we get into this, it's important to know that, so Churchill, we know he went to Sandhurst, and then he joined the 4th Hussars and is placed to India and sort of lived the life of a cavalry officer who'd not seen much action. And a lot of these guys didn't see action. Now, Churchill, by the time he enters Parliament, has seen action in 4 major conflicts. He's been on 3 continents. So, I mean, he's a seasoned warrior by the time he joins Parliament in 1900. And a lot of these ideas about how the military is used and the tactics, intelligence, signals intelligence, which is, of course, an emerging field, right? And I'll explain the context around these things as we go through it. So the first place we need to start, I think, is in Cuba. So Churchill took a job as a war correspondent, and he went there with the Spanish Empire and looking at the Cuban insurrection, right? And in order to do this, he needed to get permission. And he approached his military superiors and told them that he wanted to go. And he was basically referred to the head of the intelligence division. And the head of the intelligence division told him that he was happy to go if he would work as an intelligence officer. So bear in mind, Churchill has this unique, interesting position whereby he's working as a press officer and an intelligence officer in his very first role.
Wow.
And the thing that they wanted to know, so the dispatches that he's writing back to the press are also dispatches that are going and being used for military purposes. Now, why this is interesting and important, contextually speaking, is that, military intelligence and all forms of intelligence at this point are basically a new science. it's kind of a gentleman's game. Nobody takes intelligence seriously that much, and it's kind of just what's discussed behind closed doors. It's hardcore military tactics and strategy and map making. That's kind of what you're looking at right now. There's not a lot of in-depth stuff. Now, in the naval side, you do get signals intelligence coming up in about the mid-1880s, right? Because if you send a group of ships somewhere, people have to be able to communicate to each other without talking. And so you get cryptographic intelligence and that kind of stuff because you need to talk in code, standard stuff. Well, because there's no kind of rules about how any of this stuff is done, press correspondents could also be intelligence officers. This is one of the really weird things that's happening. So the stuff that Churchill's writing back to the audience is also the stuff that he's kind of saying to the British kind of military thinkers. Yes.
So my question to you is, because you're right, he has this kind of dual role thing going on right now at this point. So when he would write back, was there any kind of censorship at this point in what he was doing? Like, was he, I mean, given we're not talking about like the importance of censorship in intelligence work quite yet, but I guess what kind of enthusiasm did he have over having this dual role so early on in his career?
Well, and I think he was more interested. I mean, that's a great question. I think he was more interested in being a war correspondent, honestly, than doing anything with intelligence. For him, the whole military career is essentially a trajectory to get him into politics and to make his name.
Like
and
ambition,
so you see
like
him do exactly. And he, because he saw his father die at such an early age, he was afraid that he would also die at an early age. And so he wanted to really push the boat out and try to get as much done as he possibly could.
I'm sorry, that man did the exact opposite than die at an early age.
Yeah, no, and he lived longer than they thought he would too, by a long shot.
For real, that man did the exact. He said, "I want to die at an early age," and he didn't. He didn't. He died so old.
No. He was, let's see, he was born in 1874 and died in 1965. So he had pretty good innings.
Yeah.
Especially when you consider his habits too. Especially.
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. It's interesting. There was an article written in the early 90s called The Churchill Factor, which is interesting because Boris Johnson named his book The Churchill Factor. Anyway, in this article in the 90s, and it was in the Daily Mail or something, I think. Anyway, doctors argued that Churchill had this longevity
Jessica, are
because
you okay?
he drank so much that it thinned his blood out.
Are you okay, Jess?
What?
I laughed. I'm sorry. Y'all go on. I was laughing and I just spit.
Jessica would be a shit spy, for the record.
Or is that what she wants you to think?
It's coming full circle because we first thought Bethany would be the shit spy, and then it's not. Then I'm a little like suspect with Jessica's reaction there to the Churchill Factor. So,
so he goes out there, and one of the things that the head of the military division told him, who was of course someone that his mother knew. So again, this is all about social networks. There was a real serious change in around this time at the end of the 19th century in small weapons manufacturing, and some people even call this the revolution of small arms. And what had happened was people were using rifles and powdered rifles. So, for instance, the British military at the time used a Henry Martini Mark II, right, which was kind of standard. It was accurate up to 600 yards. But then along comes Mauser, and Mauser creates a rifle that's accurate up to 1,000 yards, and in some cases more, depending on what thing you have. But that's not even that important. What's more important is that he came up with the 757 millimeter bullet and smokeless gunpowder. And this is revolutionary. This is game changing. And Churchill is sent to Cuba to find out about this bullet and about the effects of these rifles, because the Spanish bought these Mausers to use against the insurrectionists in Cuba. So that's where Churchill first sees action, and is first fired upon is in Cuba while he's out there. And he does write about these weapons and sends them back to the press and, for everyone to see. So we know that he sort of accomplishes his mission about sort of finding out the effectiveness of these rifles. And you can see this in his writing and in his dispatches. And it became a real interesting thing. Now, the British didn't want to invest in the Mauser rifles yet because they're sort of too expensive, and they had so many Henry Martinis Mark IIs lying around that they thought, look, we're good to go. Whatever, we're the British Empire, and we got a cavalry charge. Who's going to mess with us?
So basically, big dick energy, essentially.
They got big dick energy in the biggest
massive.
Say that. It's like, we got some big dicks. Just grab your big dick that's lying around. That one will do, and charge. Literally.
Exactly.
With the martinis,
see,
with the old
what's
guns.
Really interesting is so that Churchill's first, I think, role in the military world, even though it's as a war correspondent and he's just there kind of taking notes. So for Britain, it's a time of peace. He's out there literally spying on the Spanish Empire, trying to find out what kind of guns they got, because that affects the arm race back in Europe, right? Which affects the arm race elsewhere in the British Empire. So all these things exist in a network, and it's important to understand that. So the next, if we move along away, and I am trying to move this because I know that the last time I was here we did 5 episodes.
Whoops. That's my fault. It's my fault.
It's all of our faults.
Wow.
So Churchill is
Body count daddy.
Can I just say, body count #daddy? You're going to talk to your finish, so you're like in this for the long haul, one way or the other. Like,
I know that. Yeah, no, I'm going to keep talking. I mean, have you heard my voice, my dulcet tones?
Have you met me? Those dulcet tones of Docter.
I'm voice pretty, ladies.
There's another expression for that, but it escapes me.
I have somniferous tones.
I'm sorry. Let me get my thesaurus again, Doctor.
Wow. Shit, I should grab mine at this point.
Oh, I like to drop the big words because I got one of those calendars that tells me big words.
He's a cheater. I get it now.
Yeah, exactly.
Word of the day, Dick. Look at him getting on his notes.
So
yeah, my notes is just word
to tie it back, to loop us back in, because I want to give Bethany an idea of the global network you kind of hinted at. So how would you describe in Bethany terms the kind of global network you're describing? Like in a visual, if you could visually describe it, if that makes sense.
Well, let's see. Into the 19th century, traditionally, scholars refer to this era as the Great Game. And because the two major powers in the world, right, are the Russian Empire and the British Empire. So what you've got here is a classic situation where the Kansas City Royals are playing off against their number one enemy. I don't know who that is, Bethany. Who do the Kansas City Royals hate?
Well, the Royals, I'm not sure, but with the Chiefs, it'd be like the Raiders or the Broncos, that kind of thing.
Okay, let's imagine the Chiefs are playing against the Raiders, and this has been going on for about a half a century.
I mean, it kind of has, but yeah.
Yeah.
It's
exactly.
like the Packers. It's like the Packers and the Lions, or the Packers and the Bears kind of shit going on.
Exactly, but the thing is, right, they're not the only players on the field. There's lots of different empires, and they're all trying to figure out what each other's doing.
You have Germany emerging.
The rise of Germany is huge.
And like nobody's really on a side. Everybody just hates everybody, or are we on side?
They're all in it for their own motivations. I mean,
that's right. You don't see. So this is traditionally this is what Britain was called an era of splendid isolation, because they did not try to seek out an alliance with anyone, because the Empire and Commonwealth was their alliance. Whereas you do have alliances under the Bismarckian system starting to develop in Europe. So like all them on the continent is sleeping around, Bethany. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah, so continental Europe is like all up in each other, okay? But then England's like, meh, we have our own. We have our colonies. We'll just rely on them, if that makes sense. So, thinking India, for example, would be a common.
Back up, hoe. I got my hoe on speed dial. Like, we're good.
India's the hoe on speed dial.
Exactly. And India is, for the sake of this argument, now this is what's interesting. A lot of intelligence historians will point to the fact that intelligence, a lot of people, I think, mistakenly think intelligence starts in 1909 for Britain when MI6, MI5 were formed officially. But of course, that's not the case. Huge, vast intelligence networks were developed in India and in Egypt through the late 19th century to
Egypt
help
is really important.
colonial administration. Yeah. And a guy named Christopher Bailey wrote really, really good books on using sort of Indian archives to explore these things. And there's another great book, Empire of Information is one. There's another book, Martin Thomas has done that about the French Empire. I mean, and so anywhere that had colonial holdings inwardly into their own subjects is developing these huge, sophisticated networks of espionage and intelligence systems. Whereas you don't see it happening so much against other powers. So there is still this idea that, famously, Henry Stimson said in the 1920s, gentlemen don't read one another's mail. Well, Britain was reading their colonial subjects' mail since like the 1850s, really since 1857 after the Sepoy Mutiny. And France has been doing the same thing. But Britain and France hadn't been reading each other's mail officially, but of course they were. It's just that nothing had been organized about how it was being done. It was all in private networks.
It wasn't Facebook official.
It was not Facebook official. That's correct.
Yeah.
I like that. They're just they're basically Tinder flirting right now. Yep. Like nobody's slidden into anybody else's DMs yet. You get what I'm saying?
There's no swipe right on the espionage yet officially, as far as intelligence work.
Or they were sliding into the DMs, but they were keeping it low key.
It's defo low key.
I like that, low key. So it's unofficial. Exactly.
Officially unofficial. That's where we're at. That's part of the vibes. I can totally feel the vibes between all. It really
so Europe's
is.
looking at each other in suspicion with England, particularly, right? Think about it from that point of view. They're like, hey, we all understand these peeps. What's their game, right?
What are they up to? And you have this situation where, obviously Germany is in the 1890s is rising, but not a total threat yet. But people aren't really clear about what Germany's going to do. And the big baddie on the block is Russia, because Russia is trying to control all of Asia, and they're afraid it's going to move through the Hindu Kush and take over India. So Britain's like, what the hell? And that's where a lot of the tension is. And this is where the great game comes from. Or as it's called in Russian, the Tournament of Shadows, which is my next
Good God, I
album.
love that. I love that. That does sound like a killer album, honestly.
I want that on a t-shirt. I want that on a t-shirt so bad.
Guys, we need merch. I don't know why the Body Count podcast hasn't created merch yet, but we got to do this.
We do.
I agree.
Well, because somebody's making a website. There's a stink bug in my whiskey. Well, that's not going to be our merchandise anymore, Bethany. We're going to put it on our website, which I am building, which, as we all know, I'm a Luddite and I'm bad at it. Hashtag bad at it.
Hashtag bad at it, but that's a shirt. Hashtag bad at it.
We already
He got that marketing mind.
Yeah, he does. He very much does. Kara had a good one the other day that when it comes to history, hashtag I am Bethany, because in a way, somewhere out there, we're all a Bethany.
That's very true.
I have a
very smart ass.
I am Bethany question right now.
Yeah.
You said where we're at with the Russians. I guess can you put time frame, because I have learned a lot about them. So I guess I'm trying to put into time frame of what's going on.
Ladder Romanovs, yeah. Where it's at.
I'm so bad with dates, but it feels like we should be in certain time frame where the Romanovs or some sort of, not Ottomans, because that's before them, right? Or kind of no.
The Ottomans still exist.
Still a thing.
They're the sick man in a way, but
not relevant. You know what I mean? The Ottomans had their thing, and then they kind of got ran out of town, kind of thing.
I mean, they're definitely hobbling, but they're still in town.
No, right? No, you know what I mean? it's a different.
Yeah, I mean,
Anyway.
It's not the
so
primary objective
right
for
now,
Russia
the Ottoman
anymore.
Empire is being propped up. I mean, that's a part of the great game, right? Is that the Ottoman Empire is being propped up by Britain and France against Russia because Russia's the main bad guy, right? From the view.
Some
Oh,
things
wait.
never change.
I was going to say the bad guy.
But and Russia remains the sort of main bad guy on the block until the Russo-Japanese War in 1905.
Which that was a ass kicking.
That took the air right out, like took the wind out of old Russia's sails in a hurry.
In fact,
It did.
I mean,
that was
it
sort
made
of
Britain feel quite great. Less
exactly.
Pretty damn good.
Like, these guys aren't taking anything. They can't even defend themselves against Japanese attacks. They got nothing. These guys are a joke. They're a clown show. So the Russian Empire kind of got revealed to be not what they had led everyone to believe that they were.
Like a charade, kind of.
Everybody just took a sigh of relief and said, whew, there's a people in dire need of mechanization right there.
That's exactly it, which is really interesting, just to go back to your point, Kara, saying that they're the sick man. I mean, there's a great argument that I think is quite interesting by an author named Ephraim Karsh, who argues actually, everyone talks about the Ottomans being the sort of weakest link, but in fact, the Ottomans outlived the Russian Empire and the Austro-Hungarian Empire. So their primary enemies, they actually outlived them, not by long, but
but technically,
the Ottomans,
yeah,
exactly. So not as weak as they might have appeared. Anyway, so now, and the reason I bring up all this imperial context is because Churchill then goes to India, is stationed in India, and again becomes a war correspondent for the Pioneer and was it the Allahabad Pioneer and I think the Daily Mail. Is that right? Or the Morning Post? No, the Morning Post is later. Anyway, he becomes another war correspondent and does his very best to get involved in what later becomes known as the Malacan Field Force. And so this is his first experience of a colonial war where he's a part of the empire sort of going out on punitive expeditions fighting against kind of local jihadist tribes that today would exactly make up the Taliban, right? So you see a sort of historical thing happening here, and this is another place where Churchill gets deeply involved with military intelligence. So again, as a cavalry officer, his job, besides being a war correspondent, is to are we? Oh no, okay. It just said there's bad network something going on. That could be me. I don't read it right.
I can hear you well.
Okay.
Yeah. I can hear you well. I don't know. I just know that 20th century historians everywhere just got hard when you got to the topic that you're talking about right now. So I could hear, maybe that was the network connection. All 20th century historians getting hard at the same time. Yeah.
So it turns out, ladies and gentlemen, history repeats itself.
What? No, it rhymes. It rhymes.
Mark Twain did not say.
Mark Twain did not say that. Just FYI.
That's good merch idea. Mark Twain did not say that.
Mark Twain never said that. That's pretty good. But anyway, so Churchill learns a lot about what, he starts writing treatises, right, on how the cavalry should be used for reconnaissance. And that actually they're used in a military capacity to go out to do scouting to come back and say where the enemies are. Rather than just running off and charging or try to do punitive expeditions, they should be used to gather intelligence in the field, which makes sense.
Anyone that's played Civ 6 knows that. Anyone that
exactly. You need a scout. I play as the Germans.
Why am I not surprised?
Shocker. Fucking color me shocked.
I always play as the Russians, inexplicably.
Again, color me shocked.
What I'm hearing is we're going to have a Civilization 6 off, y'all, and I'm going to take over the world.
Shit.
I mean, if anybody's a born dictator.
He'll be the Gandhi, so he'll be the one that inexplicably nukes everyone. Because that's what's happened since Civ 3.
What is happening right now? I have no idea what any of y'all are talking about.
We nerded out so hard just then.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I went into like nerd, like ultra.
You know those games your husband plays? This is some of the stuff he's doing.
She looks
That
like
was
she's
an
seen,
eye
like,
roll for the ages right there. Like that is,
listeners,
if
you
I
couldn't
could
see that,
capture
but
that.
you could see the whites of her eyes in that moment.
That really
Yeah.
delighted me. So Churchill befriends intelligence officers who and comes up with all these theories about how how cavalry should be used for intelligence. And he also borrows some of their own thinking because he starts arguing he writes essays to military magazines saying, look, there needs to be a difference between a sort of tactical intelligence kind of cavalry reconnaissance officer and a political intelligence officer. The political intelligence officer needs to know the languages and the lay of the land and the people, but tactics and stuff should be left to the military side, because if you've got one side trying to do the other side, they don't really understand what they're supposed to be doing.
That's
So
like
he's calling for sort of
that's like a PE teacher all of a sudden becoming a sex ed educator. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
It just no.
Never the two should meet.
It just
Yeah.
jives like
Exactly.
2 seconds. It just you're not. It's not gonna work.
Are you saying they're sword
That's
fighting in a sense?
Yeah.
Oh, major
Yes.
sword fighting.
Just
Tip to tip, nothing's happening.
A little
you've
bit of
got a
docking.
filthy
A little bit
mind.
of docking going on.
Ting 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 ting.
Doc! Oh God, Tara with the win. Oh my God,
the
Tara, you
obvious-
just made my whole
If
night.
anyone could see what Warren
No, it's
and
just that
Jessica
I
were
didn't
doing,
expect docking from Tara. That's all.
She's the one that will surprise you. She sneaks in with shit like that. You don't even know.
it's the
She
witty
sneaks
banter.
in.
You save it. You save it for the right moment.
See
That
here.
was well executed. You have just received a banter sniper award from me.
A tactical scout.
Yeah,
You better-
tactical.
Ha
Better
ha!
frame it and put it on your wall. Here.
I know it'll be my
Yeah,
gold
yeah.
star of approval
looks
from a
like one of
verified Twitter
these.
user. Actually, I do like the one that's like adjacent to your main certificate, like the one that's like a little black and white.
That one.
Yeah, it looks
It's
like a shopping
probably
bag.
an award. Don't encourage
No,
him.
no,
Don't
no,
fucking
no.
encourage him.
That's my PhD.
He put that bag in the cart.
Y'all fucking encouraged him. Why did you encourage him? God. Oh,
Let me tell you about all the awards I won while I was doing that PhD.
He stares off into the
Should I break
sunset.
it down chronologically or should I do it alphabetically?
Can we do another podcast for that, or
It'll
I've
have
got
to be
so
a
many
series,
people.
Bethany.
I've got so many people I'm tagging in this episode, by the way, just for shit like that.
vibe
I want
the vibe I got from you, Warren, on that was like, oh, this old thing.
That exactly what it
listener,
was. The false
listener,
humility is
He is
amazing.
wearing a beret. I thought
We
And
asked,
a scarf.
we requested those things.
it was
So
requested. It was requested. So to record a body count, you must have and don proper attire.
that is correct. And I'm just ashamed that right now, because it's packed away, I couldn't wear my Cambridge robes for you. In
I was
addition,
going to
top
say,
hat.
he's
I would've-
going to
I
say
would've done the
something
top hat.
about Cambridge robes in a minute. Like, give it fucking 15 seconds. And
I
there
want
it
every
Where's
is.
the
one of your-
Churchillian cigar? That's the question.
He abandoned it. Because
yeah,
he's a
it's over.
poser.
When I put you ladies in my bed, I left it over there on the desk.
You body count hashtag daddy.
Daddy.
You. Hashtag sweater daddy.
He gets the
That's
first
me.
body count hashtag daddy award.
I mean,
Yeah.
how many times do you get to say that you had 3 of us in your bed? Like, come on, like it's pretty
Very
awesome.
difficult. Very rare.
You're now the player of the podcast world, by the way, because,
Hello,
I have the
ladies.
connections.
I'm saying, and it's a unique amalgamation of hot too that he's dealing with. So like,
I think it's
look at him.
I think it's
It is.
the well.
I always call it his facial Yggdrasil. It's like the tree of the world is on his face. It's where all his knowledge is hidden in.
And meanwhile, the producer's like,
no, he's like, you know what? This is one of the more normal. No, he's not. He's going to be like, this is one of the more normal conversations, quite frankly, y'all have ever had. Period.
That's probably true. There are whole episodes, boys and girls, that we recorded that had to be destroyed.
I mean,
what?
There's one episode that is in the series of Warren that actually had to be completely deleted and redone because somebody.
I got blackout drunk, Kara.
The body count tape.
Blackout drunk.
And she gave a piece of her mind, and I was like, Jessica, we're recording right now.
I think of Jessica as a very, very close friend, and I have never been so aggressively. I've had to wrestle with some hard customers from time to time. I have never been so. That was a tough thing, and I had to keep saying, "You invited me here."
I'm just picturing in my head, and I'm like seeing flames right now, Jessica.
Oh, it was literally like a cartoon character. Like, even to this point, I still don't know what set her off because I think I was like still just trying to like blindly follow along what was happening. And then like all of a sudden just was like,
so this is why I'm on the show, is it? Because we have to prevent a redux.
She was just like, I'm not anymore. I'm going to say what I need to say and he's going to hear it. And not that only.
And it was about 30% coherent. I mean, whatever it was she was saying was like, yeah, I guess.
Oh no, it's like Wolf of Wall Street. Have you guys seen that? Where he's like on Quaaludes, right? It's literally, that's what I'm picturing right now. Like him when he's like on Quaaludes, like crawling into the freaking like.
Let me put it the next.
Not wrong.
When I woke up the next morning and was looking at a series of text messages, I'm like, what the fuck are these two assholes even talking about? They're like making up shit that happened. And then I listened to about half of that and I was like, oh, sweet Jesus.
We worked together, Jessica. I messaged Warren. I was like, she's not normally like that.
Bethany for the PR. Bethany like, sweet Jesus.
It was like having to do a podcast in a lake of lava is how I would describe that. And Bethany doing her very best to be like, no, we'll put water on it. We'll put water. It's fine. Just keep going.
So like this raging fire with little Bethany with her little bucket trying to put it out as it continues to spew. Good God.
Jessica, stop it.
Jessica.
And I mean, I think I don't know. I don't remember, Bethany. Maybe you. I don't know. I don't remember if I was nice the whole time or if I stopped being nice and started burning stuff. I don't remember.
And adding to the pyre.
I think we started burning shit together.
Well,
you sound way too happy about that fact. You're just very smiley right now, and it's perturbing.
Well, eventually,
I did have a lot of fun.
Hold on. Warren, to answer your question, eventually it became to the point where we were no longer laughing. And I think that you started to stay more quiet because every time you tried to put your knowledge forth,
2 cents.
Jessica was like, oh, and another thing. How about that? Let me tell you about that, mister. And just went to school. I was like, well,
what I guarantee what set me off was the thing that always sets me off that Oren says. And it's because it's so very true as he sits in front of his fucking PhD. I'm sure it was, well, I am the authority. And he is, but I resent it deeply.
Gentleman on those episodes, Jessica. He was fantastic. So I'm just so happy to have him back.
As you paint him as a fucking saint. Okay, fine. We're gonna go on. We're gonna go on because now we're just getting into
in real life.
territory.
I'm a real bastard.
He's
Okay.
a real asshole.
So to drive it back in, where were we in the
So we're on the northwest frontier, and Churchill arguing about how reconnaissance and cavalry should be used.
That's right.
As
Our
well
Civ
as
situation.
Exactly, the Civ 6 situation, which is how we got off there. And so he starts writing the arguing about this and about the role of political intelligence officers versus sort of tactical intelligence officers. And he actually writes into the military magazine and argues that this distinction should be made after his own sort of interviews with other intelligence officers and why they thought that was important. Now, in the interim here, and I need to raise this.
Wait,
Churchill
can I ask a quick question? So is that a consensus among most people in the field, what he's writing about?
At the time.
Is that like a feeling at the time? As far as approaching intelligence that way, is that a consensus?
So no is the answer. I think because so few people were writing, I don't know if you could say a consensus had developed yet.
Okay.
But what, for instance, David Stafford argues in his book about Churchill and the Secret Service is that Churchill, not that he plagiarized some of the military intelligence officers he had spoken to, but he heavily leans on them in his writings because he's a journalist, right? So essentially he's doing kind of journalistic writings. He's not trying to be a military theorist, but he does want to kind of secretly low-key make his name as a military theorist.
So he's kind of like, while I'm doing this, let me add my 2 cents and see if I can make some waves going on.
That's exactly it. So he after the Malacan Field Force kind of completes its mission, he goes back to India. He plays polo, and so he's not out fighting wars all the time. He's also kind of living the life of Riley and kind of living up and really enjoying colonial India, which, as we know, for all sorts of problems now is problematic, and was problematic then, particularly if you were Indian. But one of the things that happens here, and this is a key thing, as you'll see in a second, is
good understatement, Warren. I know. Good understatement.
I'm sorry, the Academy has just given me your Understatement of the Year award. Oh, wow. That's
Somebody
a big trophy.
has adopted British mannerisms in his stint across the sea.
I obviously know nothing of the historical content, but you've already called India a side chick, so I can only imagine the drama with this. So, I don't really know everything.
To be
There
fair,
is so much drama, Bethany. So much.
Imperial side piece.
It's guaranteed drama, so I may not fully understand historically what's going on, but I'm getting the picture.
Well, so it's interesting that you mentioned that. So anyway, this is real important. In one of the polo tournaments, he really hurts his shoulder, okay? And it gets dislocated, and this becomes really problematic and important later on. He then goes to one of the British Empire's other side pieces, which is Egypt.
Shit.
I've heard of this side piece.
Yeah. And Egypt and India, they kind of know about each other, but Europe doesn't know what's going on. Oh, it's dirty. They're doing real dirty stuff.
I mean,
I'm pretty sure
geographically,
Egypt and India have been on. I'm pretty sure they're all like K brothers and sisters. Yeah.
geographically, there's no way they wouldn't. You know what I mean? Be
right. And
know of that.
And to be fair, side pieces usually know about other side pieces. It's just kind of like a known fact. So that makes sense.
Snap.
They were texting about it. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, there was some pretty serious texting
at my house last night. Well, he came over 2 nights ago, so bitch.
Exploiting these resources. Exploit my resources for once. Like,
Get on my resource. My cotton production is superior to your cotton production.
Jump on my subcontinent, would you? Jesus.
Ladies, I'm going to explore all your resources. Come down. There's plenty of empire to go around, ladies.
I'm going to
I'll
exploit
all
of y'all.
There's a little tear.
That's how the British Empire.
That is how the British Empire rolled.
The British Empire can be summed up quite simply by thinking of It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia when he's like, "Look, D, you either go get or you get got. I go get."
I go get.
I'd agree.
I'm a 5-star man.
I'm a 5-star empire
man. Yeah. Oh.
One for mom.
Now, Bethany, what would be the weaknesses you would think that an island in the sea would have with having such a vast, because obviously there are advantages to having colonies, but what are there any disadvantages, Doctor, that would have made obviously there are, you and I both know, but explain the disadvantages. How about that?
of having an empire.
No, specifically
No.
of how like intelligence communications would work.
Right. So they're no, okay. So in terms of how intelligence develops is, this creates a real issue between the colonial administrators and whom you rule, because then effectively you're creating secret police in the same way the Stasi or Gestapo or, Cheka or any of those kind of things worked. And so you build up a lot of resentment. Now, there are different models that took place. It's not the same model because the British Empire is a hodgepodge of nonsense. There's nothing logical about any of it. And so what's going on in India is completely different than what's going on in Egypt and how it's administered and administered and so forth. Because technically, Sudan becomes a colony, but Egypt is a dependent, but is also a dependent of the Ottoman Empire. And so the Egypt can't sign into any legal official agreement with Britain without the Ottoman Sultan signing off. And so it formally becomes what's called a condominium.
It's like
a condo. It's your grandma's condo.
Ah, so good. Oh, that's so good.
I was actually going to say Egypt sounds like she caught feelings is all I was going to say. It feels like
she but couldn't act on it. She couldn't.
Egypt
caught feelings but couldn't act on it.
That's true. And that's because Egypt's still in a relationship with the Ottomans and has been since about, 1300.
They double dipping.
They double dipping big time.
But they see what else is out there, man. So
and shit had fizzled, right?
Maybe someone else can exploit my resources. And here's the thing: before we jump into the River War, or what Churchill called the River War, and he wrote a really good book about that. And in terms of his intelligence writing, his book on it, the River War, isn't so much based on intelligence as it is on the sort of long history and culture of what Britain was doing in Egypt. And it's important as well here to note that this is a place where Churchill had worked with a guy named Horatio Kitchener, who, of course, is a famous guy that from the poster, right, in the First World War. And Churchill develops a real disliking of him because of his brutal methods. And what Kitchener's quite genius at is not necessarily that he's that brutal, although later in the Boer War he did institute concentration camps. That's a fact, kids. So he is quite a brutal guy, but he is a real sort of like logistical kind of autistic approach to war. So one of the problems with fighting the Mahdists through the 1880s down in Sudan for Britain was they'd run out into the desert and then Britain would follow and then they'd get lost in the desert and come back. And they couldn't really accomplish anything. And they would try to use the Nile. Well, Kitchener says, you know what? Forget all that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to build railways, and we're going to do this bit by bit, and it's going to be slow, and it's going to be monotonous and sort of tactically done all the way along. And Kitchener goes down there as the Sardar, which is an honorary title, which is essentially the head of the military. But even though he's British, he's the head of the Egyptian military, which is weird. But he gets that position. And he rebuilds painstakingly over the course of years the Egyptian military and turns it into a real serious fighting force with a real serious military intelligence apparatus. And they slowly start moving into modest territory in the Sudan, slowly securing the desert against these sort of the modest rebellion. And then it's at that point Churchill comes over and joins. And one of the stories that's real interesting here, and like I say, the primary focus of his work on this is not so intelligence focused, but there is a real important, well, two important things that I think happen, maybe three. And the first one is that so Churchill's out on patrol doing his reconnaissance thing, and he comes across a dervish. Remember, one of the modest, a dervish, and he's so excited he's going to catch his own prisoner of war. He disarms the guy, he wraps him up, puts him behind his pony, and is going to take him back to camp. So he slowly brings this guy back to camp, only to discover that this guy isn't a dervish at all. He's actually an agent who had infiltrated the dervish army. So Churchill had accidentally captured one of his own. Exactly. And, it's really interesting. So he records this in the first edition of the River War, that this had happened in his embarrassment. And then in the second edition, he cuts that out. And then in his autobiographical account in the 1930, he doesn't mention it at all. So he's clearly very embarrassed by the fact that he was taken in. And one of the things that becomes very clear in the book, if you read the first edition, is he is utterly captivated at how amazingly capable these spies are, because they fooled him. And, he talks about their bravery and the fact that, Kitchener's slowly closing this line. And even up to the last day before the charge, there's still spies going back and forth. And he talks about this sort of what Christopher Bay would call a kind of empire of information that Kitchener was able to build up around the Mahdi, and that all his courts had been penetrated by British spies. And that's how they were able to get all this information. Churchill becomes really interested in this stuff, right? And it sounds a lot like what Churchill does in the Second World War with Operation Double Cross, right? Where they take the German spies and flip them. So you can see a lot of this groundwork is being laid here. Now, the next important thing is the actual battle itself, and this is something I know we're the body count podcast. So we know that Churchill, I think, gets 4 confirmed kills, and I think all of them were basically at this charge, and he almost gets killed himself during the cavalry charge. And he takes part in the official charge. They blow the bugle, they're running in, and there's a certain moment when he gets thrown from his horse. And a lot of historians, including Andrew Roberts and even Martin Gilbert, argued that if Churchill had been carrying the lance, he would have been killed. But he didn't carry the lance because his arm had been dislocated in the polo tournament. And so instead, he was able to use his rifle as his side piece. See what it did? And wasn't using an actual literal lance. So he was able to draw that on swordsmen because he got separated from the kind of wave and got surrounded and had to fight his way out. And so that's one of those amazing, really interesting moments where who knows what could have happened.
Who said that phrase? Don't bring a knife to a gunfight, or don't bring a sword to a gunfight.
That's exactly it. Well, he rocks up with a gun.
Kara, you had a question?
Yeah, a question and a comment. First off,
Good.
I'm not a big fan of Roberts as a biographer because I'm not sure he's objective. Both I've read his Napoleon and I've read his work on Churchill, and I have a hard time buying him. However, that's my comment aside. It is intriguing because this is where you emphasized the importance of like the earlier injury, and as a result of that injury being so significantly impactful in this particular moment. That's wild. So no, I didn't have a question. I had a comment.
Really interesting. And just to note, I mean, I don't know if you know this. There's no reason you would. I know that Jessica knows this because I talked to her about it. I've had to fight Andrew Roberts on a number of occasions on BBC Radio and other places, arguing about various things. Andrew Roberts and I are I'm going to say pretty decent friends. And despite all of our disagreements, have been able to sort of be cordial and nice to one another and respectful. I have tremendous respect for him as a historian and biographer. I think it's impossible to read his Churchill and think this guy, he sees Churchill in rose-colored glasses and he wants his readers to know it. And so is he an objective biographer? Probably not.
But I will say, in his defense, he wants his readers to know it. Like, it's never a fucking question.
I mean, doesn't an author really want, though, that to be illustrated whenever they're writing something? Like how they not view it isn't the right phrase, but why they would feel that way, if you will.
Well,
feel
I think that's
justified.
an interesting point, because I think if you're going to write or talk about anything, the entire point is to be objective. So I guess it's just a question of methodology.
Well, it's interesting because Churchill was a war correspondent, okay? So you get later into World War II and objectivity's out the fucking window.
Well, one of the really interesting things here, and this is, I should have mentioned this in Cuba, and it's one of the things he talks about in the River War as well, is he talks about how important censorship is. And so he learned from the Spanish, who absolutely did control. You asked that question earlier, and we didn't get to cover it. The Spanish had a really good control over what got off the island and what was circulated around the island. But there's something more important that Churchill picked up in Cuba, and that was that the guerrilla opponents, the insurrectionists, were using guerrilla tactics, hit and run tactics, and they honestly didn't give a shit. So the censorship, it played very little part. But Churchill himself, despite being a war correspondent who pushed for open freedom of press things as a young man, as we see in the First World War, and then especially in the Second World War with the D notices, essentially is like, I'm closing it down. Yeah. So let's see. We talked about the first thing hold on. I'll get there. So, and we talked about his shoulder and how he had to use that piece, and then that fact. Now, he got lots of help in writing the River War because, as you know, that initially the first volume of that is a 2-volume book, and he used we went to the intelligence division and got them to help them with all the maps and inserts in the book. So he had sort of been given a blessing by the intelligence division to put and use this information that had been gathered by all these spies he was so impressed with. And he developed really good relationships with this intelligence operation. So much so that Churchill afterwards resigned his position because he thought that he might be able to go back to Britain, and he sort of resigned out of the military, right? And he thought that he could go in 1899 and try to get into politics, which he tried, and he ran in a by-election and lost. But in the interim, he thought, oh, what can I do? So he was looking for a military position that would keep him in Britain, but he could still be in the military. And we know from the Churchill documents there are at least 2 or 3 letters where he wrote, one of which was to his mother and one was to Ian Hamilton, and also to Elmer Haldane, who is one of his friends, about feeling out whether or not he could himself get into the intelligence branch, and speculatively thinking about joining up formally into the intelligence branch. So what he decides instead is to remain as a journalist, and of course all this tension's been building in South Africa, which brings us to the Boer War. And Churchill himself joins after his election defeat and his speculation about joining the intelligence branch. He decides, he's making a lot of money. He's one of Britain's very well-known journalists, and he goes to the South African War, to the Boer War, to work as a journalist. And he at that time he holds no military position. And almost as soon as he gets there, he gets on at Durban to take an armored train, and it gets attacked by these Boers. Now, I want to pause here because there's some things we need to lay about what's happening in the Boer War. It's at the Boer War where Britain kept using these tactics I was talking about, cavalry charges and so forth, still holding on to these old Martini Henry rifles. And the Boers had been using Mausers, and the Boers had their own very sophisticated battle tactics. It's a lot closer to what we think of as battle tactics today. That's right. So they have snipers. They use cover. They don't march in lines in the middle of the road. Their
accuracy is a lot better from a farther distance.
And they use smokeless rifles. So they're the cavalry charge, and there are a few generals who've gone on record saying, "Look, we try." And the second that we get lined up, they just shoot us all down. We lose men left and right. We can't use this.
Gee, I wonder how that happened.
Exactly. And you have this thing where the British military is sort of so stagnant, they don't know what to do with the cavalry because they can't use the cavalry how they've been using the cavalry for 100 years against the Boers. The Boers have very sophisticated tactics. Now, the other contextual thing you need to know about the British operation is that their intelligence unit in the Boer War in South Africa, in Pretoria, in the Orange State, and the other sort of South African republics is trash. It's a clown show. To give you an idea, the budget there, when John Ardagh, who was an Irishman who was in the British Empire, who came in and took control of it, and wrote, this is remarkable. And Churchill himself writes about this in his own, in My Early Life and in his own history of the Boer War, which is called London to Ladysmith via Pretoria, and also Ian Hamilton's March. So it's a 2-volume set. Anyway, John Ardagh writes before or the lead up to the sort of Boer War a thing about Boer tactics and saying, look, the Boers are better soldiers than us. It's going to take at least 200,000 men for us to go in here and stop them. And he sends this sort of based on his intelligence reports, this really accurate 2-volume book over to the people who are running the war, including the general Redvers Buller, who everyone called Buller, and the state, I can't think of the guy's name. I should know this. It's not Salisbury, who's basically the Secretary of the State of War. And he sends it over to him, and within an hour, it's returned to John Ardagh, and they say, we know everything there is to know about the Boer War, about Boers, about South Africa.
Well, we know what's going to happen.
Exactly. We know exactly what's going to happen. And Churchill himself talked about how foolish these men were because they refused to listen to the intelligence. And what most intelligence historians who work on the Boer War, and this is a real moment in the development of British intelligence. So you do have a lot of military intelligence,
It's
and
a
Christopher Andrews
confrontation
writes
of old and new, really. Like you have your classically trained people that just thought, okay, we know what there is to know because we've observed and we've seen and we've been colonizers, even though they have to be aware on some level that they're being outflanked, they're being outgunned quite literally in both tactics and in sheer arms.
Well, especially
and then you have the nuance of the new.
Well, especially
sorry, Bethany.
I was just gonna add, like, especially even as an outsider, we've already established that they were like, help, we're being gunned down. You know what I mean? So obviously they're struggling because their war tactics aren't working, and they don't.
They
know
wouldn't
how
have this to begin with if they were so, how do I put it, brilliant and knew everything there was to know.
Exactly. And I mean, this is what's really remarkable.
We know everything, even though we're losing. We don't need help. We got this.
Exactly. And they keep coming in and giving these guys these old rifles and telling them to do what they've always done, and they keep losing. And, this eventually culminates in a thing called Black Week, where there are 3 major battles that are lost that were catastrophic for the British forces there, and General Buller was basically dismissed after this. But here's what's remarkable. John Ardagh put together this huge report, and in it he said, listen, basically one Boer soldier, just a Boer soldier, is worth 5 to 7 British soldiers. That's how good they are. And of course, Buller and the Secretary for War said, look, this is nonsense. Lord Lansdowne, that's who it was, and got rid of it. And didn't want to listen
that's
to
how
it.
you quash things.
Wait. This is the most remarkable thing about this really accurate thing that John Ardagh put together. His budget, his entire budget for the intelligence division in South Africa was £11,000. By comparison, the Boer intelligence division budget, and these guys are poor African farmers, their intelligence division budget is about £90,000. So Britain has absolutely no regard for intelligence.
I wonder why.
Oh,
in South
I wonder
Africa.
how that bit them in the ass. I mean,
Exactly. And so, there's some really interesting lessons here. So what happens is that John Ardagh produces this book. They refuse to read it. And this book's really accurate. And he does this on a budget of £11,000. I mean, it's remarkable. Then, of course, they get their asses kicked. And then John Ardta gets blamed because the General Buller said, well, I never got the good intelligence. Nobody ever gave me the intelligence.
And he's like, the book you sent back.
Honestly, it sounds like your college kids that are like, do I need a book for this class? And then, like, they don't pass it. And they're like, but you didn't tell me any of this stuff. Like,
Because it's in the book. Exactly.
Exactly.
Good God, yes.
But there was basically in 1902, I think, or maybe 1904, there was an inquiry into this, and John Ardta was then. Everyone was like, actually, this guy was really good, and it was General Buller that messed it up, and so that's what we're talking about, right? In the Second Boer War, this is the context in which Churchill rocks up. So Churchill goes as a journalist, and he's writing, and he gets involved in a skirmish where an armored train car gets blown off its tracks, and he helps a bunch of people escape to safety and then is taken prisoner. And then Churchill famously, and Almer Haldane, his friend, is also captured. Well, Churchill famously escapes and is able to kind of sneak around, and everybody raises the fact that Churchill could be tried as a spy at this point, right? Because he's out gallivanting the sort of Boer side of these republics.
I could see that, yeah, from the censorship point of view. It looks really suspect what he's doing.
Exactly. And he eventually winds his way back to the British-controlled territory and becomes a national hero. I mean, this is the real moment that Churchill becomes a household name, because he then becomes
what he's
the
looking
highest.
For.
Yeah, this is what he wants. He then becomes literally the highest paid journalist in British history at this moment. So this is what he wanted, but he also, quite cleverly, also is able to convince General Buller before he's dismissed to sign off on him getting another commission as a lieutenant. So he re-enters the military in a battlefield commission in the South African Light Horse. Exactly, very sneaky. Now, and it's from this point that Churchill enters the battle and goes forth at places like Sion Kop and sort of actively fights the Boers until the end of the war. Bethany, you had a question?
So what I'm trying to understand here is that he went from possibly being tried as a spy to being promoted?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that I'm following and summarizing in my head. Okay. All right, cool.
Clever.
It is a
clever
little,
bit of spin by him.
Yeah. No, I mean, I picked up on that. Good for him. Really good for him.
Could have been really bad for him very quickly.
It was the Boers that were going to hang him, not the British. I just want to make sure that we understand that point. But
okay,
right, because he escaped as a prisoner of war, and rather than because in those days the rules of conduct were if you were captured, and because he had a name, right, Churchill, he would have been held hostage, right? They would have negotiated him. And he escapes, and so the Boers, and you can see to this day, they have copies of the wanted poster that was put out that asked for him alive or dead, and they offered, I think, £25 for his successful capture and return.
25 pounds is nothing, man. Can you imagine just being like, here's Churchill, 25 pounds, that's it?
Yeah, no, I know. And what's also really interesting is when Churchill is in the POW camp, this is remarkable. He says to the leader, I demand to write to President, the leader of the Boers, who I think, is it Kruger or I can't remember the name of the leader of the Boers at this point. It might be Kruger or it might be, starts with a D. It doesn't matter. He writes to the thing and demands to be released because he isn't holding a military position. He's only a journalist. And they write back to the prison guards and they say, Winston Churchill is one of the most dangerous men in South Africa. Under no circumstances is he allowed to be released. And when Churchill reads this response, he's like, well, I'm going to leave. And he did. And yet he escaped as a prisoner of war. And then, like I say, successfully gets back to the British-controlled side.
That's badass.
Which is remarkable. Now, again, he sees a lot of action in the Boer War against the Boers, and he leaves and goes and does a by-election in 1900 and gets elected. So he leaves the war behind and isn't there for the really destructive part of the last sort of 2 years of the Boer War. I don't know if you know much about it. Is real nasty shit. Kitchener basically starts putting together concentration camps. The guerrilla war becomes absolutely incredibly mean and difficult. Both sides are doing really vicious stuff to each other. It gets real nasty. And Churchill's able to leave before he gets involved in that. But while he is there, he obviously partakes in a lot of stuff. And he starts writing those essays back again to the military magazine, offering his opinion on what should be done. And I dug one of these things out, and I was looking for it. I don't know if I've got it here with me, but some of the things he argues for, there are two things in particular that are about signals intelligence, just to show that Churchill's thinking about how signals intelligence works, which is, again, a burgeoning field at this moment. So one of these ideas is actually kind of cool and makes a lot of sense. And I'll tell you the good idea first. And that idea was that one of the things that he came to see was, on the battlefield, that the communication between the artillery and the infantry was very poor. And so when the infantry said, hey, you need to bomb this hill, you need to fire on this hill, frequently what would happen was they'd go up the hill and do better than the artillery thought, and the artillery didn't have time to readjust, so they're actually firing on men. So the thing the artillery would be able to communicate these ideas in the battlefield that Churchill came up with was they could use certain plumes of smoke in the ordnance so that people would know the other artillery places would be able to look at this one artillery place and know exactly where to fire, at what angle, and so forth, so as not to hit the troops, which I think is pretty.
I would agree with the smoke, but then that gives away somebody, where you're at. What I'm thinking personally is baseball signal, like when the coaches are on the sideline and they're doing but
there are vast distances, Bethany. These are they're far.
Binoculars.
But
that's a
I just see you with binoculars, Bethany.
No, that's a very good binocular. But I am glad that you pointed that out, Bethany. Now,
thumbs up around the red. Oh yeah, that's an ally. That's an ally. Yep, don't shoot.
That's my own man.
But
he's got a follow-up for this.
The idea about giving away your position, right? Because that is an issue with that. But you could still get around it if you use the right color of plume and so forth.
Okay.
But the other idea he had, and this is remarkably stupid.
Yay! This is my favorite kind of shit.
So Churchill, one of the jobs that he had as a liaison officer, which again is an intelligence thing, he would act as a courier to move between generals. And one of the problems that he identified in this paper was, as a subaltern, it's very difficult to know how to find generals. So when you move from one general to the other, it's difficult to know their positions.
Oh no, I see.
So he came up with a system whereby general positions could be known by raising a balloon. And different colors of balloon would indicate rank, and the bigger the balloon would indicate, general versus colonel and so forth. But at no point,
reveal.
What?
Yeah, it's a gender reveal party.
It's a general reveal.
It's a general
location reveal.
Good. I didn't hear that. It's a general reveal party.
General reveal party.
At no point did he ever consider that having a balloon in the air would mean that the enemy would know where your general was. Right?
That's so a t-shirt. That's so merch right there.
Oh yeah, general reveal party.
I saw.
By the way,
when I saw those balloons in my head, I was like, "Yep."
It just is on a background of a balloon and general reveal party. Also, can I just put it forth that this little snippet alone is what Warren pitched this entire episode off of, and I was like, "Fucking sold."
General reveal party.
Yeah,
no, general reveal party. No, this idea of signals intelligence.
What? If I need to plug up my computer. Here we go. I do have the actual writing.
He's brought sources. I'm excited. He's brought
He's
visual-
brought sources.
visual aids.
I always have sources. So this was published in the military journal, and it's called Some Impressions of the War of South Africa. It's published in 1900, and it's got my notes all over it. I'm going to find so I can just read you so you know how ridiculous this is.
Hey, get yourself back in camera as well.
Oh, right. Sorry.
Yeah, he's done TV, audience.
Yeah, I have.
It's funny, Rip. Yeah, that was the joke.
He's been on the silver screen.
So this is Winston Churchill's own words. I have one more suggestion, which is entirely my own, and which I trust you will not think I put forward in too frivolous a mood. The great difficulty of finding brigand division commanders in the field, I think, comes home to anyone who has been carrying messages in South Africa, especially in the Orange Free State, where the extent of the ground over which the army was spread was most enormous. How are you to find the general, you ask? You're told, I saw him a half an hour here ago, but he galloped over there. It was utterly impossible in many cases for the bearers of important messages to find a hardly visible, the different commanders at different brigades and different divisions. The general's flag was hardly ever visible at such great distances, and when it was visible, it was usually fired at and taken down. So, I mean, he's answering his own problem, and he talks about how the heliograph was no guide, blah, 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 blah.
That sounds like something I would do, though, to be honest, guys. Like, I laugh, but then I think about it, and I'm the kind of person that, like, answers their own questions when they discover a problem. So I'm like, oh no, I'm laughing, but I'm like, oof, that would have been me too. Sending the memo.
This is the golden bit. The only thing that you could see in the Orange Free State at all was a great balloon. You see it 20 miles off, you knew where that was, and you knew where the headquarters was of the army. I do not see why every general should not have his own balloon. One general, one balloon. I would not suggest anything so democratic as they should all have the same size balloon. Each general should have a balloon in proportion to his own rank in the army. You make a very convenient portable balloon about a yard square that could be carried about on a horse by an orderly, and by which would ascend 200 or 300 feet and show distinctly the position of every brigadier. It may be said, would that not draw fire? Very likely it would. But a balloon's a very hard thing to hit. So he's imagining people are going to try to shoot the balloon, not the general.
I mean,
I'm laughing because I'm actually relating to him right now in like my banker sphere, okay? So in my mind, it's like when you have a problem.
But it's true though. Have you seen a balloon in the air? You know what I mean? Like it's hard to shoot. It's moving around. It's like one of those those
dancing guys.
Yeah, but in war, you're not looking for the balloon. You're looking for the enemy. Hopefully, if not, you need Ritalin for the entire brigade.
I would be distracted by a hot pink balloon. That would be my general color. Like, hello.
I guess what intrigues me is the different size balloons. I'm like,
but see, and this is, I bring this up to show you that even great minds like Winston Churchill have really dumb ideas.
Man, I relate. I'm like, I've never felt like I am Churchill before.
So these are some of the takeaways around signals intelligence that I wanted to share with you that he got from the Boer War. And another thing that's really important here, remember his other role was that he was a journalist. He was a war correspondent. Now there's an excellent article that has been written by a guy named Donald P. McCracken, which I also have here, who wrote from Natal. And he did a sort of, I don't know, it's kind of a PhD deep dive on different war correspondents in the Boer War to talk about how shambolic the system was. And bearing in mind that some of these guys are intelligence officers as well, because his what he looks at is the relationship between British war correspondents and military intelligence. And some of the things that he found out was amazing. And one of them is that it was utterly chaotic. I told you how little money went into the intelligence in the Boer War during this phase of the war, right? So nobody knows anything.
Pounds, right?
Yeah, 11,000 pounds. He discovered that there is no single centralized list of which war correspondents were even there.
Wow.
It's
So that
all
means
ad
you could
hoc.
just write your name and just be like,
And
I
he
was
brings
there.
up examples where people are like, yeah, I'm with the New York Times, and people be like, okay.
No, it's like literally when the teacher asks you to come up and write down your name, your friend is like, hey, hey, can you write my name down while you're up there? Can you just
Oh, for
sign?
attendance, yeah. Signing the
And-
attendance, yeah.
And
It's-
deuces.
That's interesting though, because that doesn't just happen during this time period. You see that happening in World War II as well with correspondence,
Yes.
I might add. So it's a common thing.
It is, but I mean, it's so, at least in the Second World War, there's a system by which you deal with it and you verify. Here, it's just like the Wild West. And so one of the things Churchill notices.
It's like Blazing Saddles. I went and he rounds up all the criminals to attack Rock Ridge, and there's just a plethora of all the different groups.
So it's the
Including
people that
Nazis.
are saying they're covering the war, if you
Yeah.
imagine that.
Yeah, sorry, but yeah, no, that's what
No, it is. That's very, very funny. But so it's so shambolic and so chaotic, and Churchill notices this and notices that that's a problem. Now that's something that I'll talk about because we're almost getting to the end of the main war stuff, and then I'll sum up with some final points at the end. But that's one of the lessons, is that the situation with the press is really difficult, and Churchill himself had taken so much heat and so many critical letters, and you can see this in the document volumes, where generals would write in and say, who the hell is this press correspondent telling us like he knows what our job is? And people were really saying that he can't hold a position as an officer and a war correspondent at the same time. And he got beat up for this in the Malacan Field Force and in the River War, so much so that the British Army agreed to stop allowing officers to be war correspondents. Except, this is one of the reasons he gave up his commission. So that's when he convinces Buller to let him back on as an officer again. He's still a war correspondent. And so he breaks the rules again and is basically out there making a name for himself. And he gets all this hate mail about it. And he's
Can
able
you
to
imagine if you're everyone else, though? They see him getting away with something that's like not supposed to be a thing.
No, exactly. And it's because of his name, really. He's got this famous name behind him, and nobody wants to mess with that. A third takeaway for him from the Boer War that plays into that hugely plays into his ethos and thinking about intelligence is, and this is the same thing he saw in Cuba, the strength of a committed guerrilla movement is almost impossible to stop. And the Boers were incredibly powerful and incredibly difficult for the British Army to deal with. And, in many ways ended the era of splendid isolation because Britain realized that it was too weak to hold its empire and had to ally itself with France at the Entente Cordiale in 1904, all directly because of its failure in the Boer War. And so these are things that Churchill sees are hugely problematic for military intelligence moving forward. So after this period that we've gone through, quite litigiously, that's not the right word, quite meticulously, around him being a war, there are sort of two key points that spew up in 1911 where you can see this stuff coming into the fore. And, this is not us getting into the Second World War or anything, but it's clear to say one of the reasons, and this is something that David Stafford is immensely good at pulling out in his book, is that one of the core takeaways for Churchill was the strength and power of a guerrilla fighting force. And this is one of the reasons he so firmly believed in the SOE in the Second World War, and letting them go to France and just fucking raise hell and blow up bridges and do whatever was because he saw that in the Boer War and in Cuba and in the Northwest frontier and thought, just let them fuck stuff up because that's really hard to deal with.
It is efficient. Yeah, because then you're like basically trying to go around fixing this stuff while trying to fight. So no, it's an incredibly effective tactic, really.
And this is, even though he maybe romanticized it, I don't think it was as effective as he thought that it was, but it is an effective way to fight a war. And this is one of the clear reasons that he did that. The other stuff that gets expressed that we can see early on are in these two moments, and they're both in 1911. So I'm going to start with chronologically the first one, and that's the Sydney the Sydney Street Siege, right? What had happened was a bunch of anarchists got down on City Street, and this is a really historic moment because they're not just anarchists, really. These are real important major players. Some of them are anarchists, some of them are communists, some of them are just bad guys. But they sort of take a place hostage and kind of set up, and there's like a battle, right, in London. And Churchill's Home Secretary at the time and goes down and personally gets interested in this. Now, at the time, he gets beaten up in the press because the Home Secretary has no business at a sort of police action. And a lot of people said he was just trying to make his name. But Churchill was especially interested because Churchill was getting information behind the scenes, right? He had been working with, since he had been colonial secretary, with people like Vernon Kell and Cunningham, who was the first C, the leader of MI6. Vernon Kell is the leader of MI5. That, these guys were real serious people. They were a Latvian gang, and some of the people that were actually there, and this is why I am quite fascinated by it, is the leader of this gang was a sort of communist / anarchist who was the Che Guevara of his day. And he was a man known by a nom de plume called Peter the Painter. And he would go around and put, graffiti on stuff and try to blow things up, and the sort of stereotypical turn-of-the-century anarchist. The problem is, historically speaking, there was no such person. Peter the Painter is like the Dread Pirate Roberts. He's not real. He's a nom de plume. And in fact, who the real power behind this was, according to some historians, and I'm not an expert in this, because some people have said that he could have possibly been actually started out as a Polish guy named Peter Pokrov, who was a sort of committed communist and anarchist, who was Polish, but who we know was definitely there was a guy named George Ganstein, who was himself a Latvian kind of a criminal who goes on later to do stuff. But he's not even the big deal. The big deal, in my opinion, was a guy named Yakov Peters, who also some people speculated was Peter the Painter. Yakov Peters, despite sounding like a comedian in the 1980s, goes on to be a co-founder of the Cheka, which is, of course, the forerunner for the NKVD and the CIA. I mean, the NKVD and the KGB.
There we go.
I was like, that's a twist.
And so the fact that Churchill's out there matching wits with this guy, that later on is going to be one of the major, the Cheka are the people that form this stuff. And these are the same guys that go out and recruit people like Kim Philby and that kind of stuff later in the 30s. So Yakov Peters, and this is another interesting thing, he runs this Cheka and is later killed by Stalin during the purges. So this guy's a major sort of player, and he gets away. He escapes the Sydney Street Siege. And it's interesting to me that Churchill and him had this brief sort of moment where they were sparring, and I find that really fascinating. Now, this experience, as it relates to intelligence, again, Churchill looked at the domestic intelligence situation as Home Secretary and thought, God, this is what it looked like in the Boer War. It's chaotic. We don't know where the aliens are. We don't know, what these guys are capable of. We don't know anything. And so he then tries to introduce a thing called the Alien Prevention of Crime Bill, which basically would put all incoming aliens, it was an addendum to the Aliens Bill of 1905, where he basically tried to put all the incoming aliens on a list. And one of the rule was that they couldn't live within, I think, 10 miles of a military base.
Oh, God.
And he uses Vernon Kell, who becomes the leader of MI5, to help put this stuff together. Churchill's working on this stuff behind the scenes, and then he thinks, gosh, that's not really enough. And that leads us on to the final point here, where he really tries to push through and does successfully push through with the help behind the scenes of people from the intelligence community. And this is 1911. So I have a question for you. Do you know which office Churchill moved to in 1911?
Are you asking?
I think are you asking us?
Yeah. I'm asking you which office.
I'm sorry, I didn't know there was an interactive portion of this. Like,
Oh, Jessica, I
Sign
know
up
how much you
So
love
wait,
Churchill.
quiz? Is this a pop quiz? Because I don't handle these. I don't handle.
No pressure, no pressure. Okay, I'll tell you. Churchill becomes the first Lord of the Admiralty. Right.
Okay.
Now, this is important, and this is in July. So he's been working as Home Secretary behind the scenes with Vernon Kell and Admiral Cunningham, and they're both in 1909 put in charge of intelligence. MI5, MI6, what we would call that today. And it's at that point, if you look at Admiral Cunningham, that SIS, as we know it formally, is brought in under the Admiralty because Churchill himself is involved in this stuff. It's all very off the books, but Churchill's very interested in this stuff. So he tries to put it under his own purview. And so he tries to push through and does push through with the help of these guys behind the scene, what's called the Official Secrets Act of 1911, which does allow for the keeping of lists about where foreign people live and how close they live and keeping notes on them domestically. So you have this kind of internal paranoia that really kicks off in the First World War. And all this happens in 1911, of course, because of the buildup to the First World War and the arms race with Germany.
I'm sorry. It just leaves a really weird taste in my mouth. Because all I can think of is that's what we do for pedophiles. That's what we do for people that are sexual offenders. They have to register.
That's
I'm
exactly
sorry.
right.
That's just kind of all I get. I was like.
That's a really awesome point, Bethany, and I'll tell you why.
Yeah.
There you go. It's because what you can see that Churchill's collecting here, with the help of Vernon Kell especially, is the very first instance of what you might think of as metadata.
Oh, wow. I know what that is.
And so he's collecting all that on all the incoming aliens that might potentially represent a threat if there's a coming war with Germany.
Wow, why does that sound so fucking familiar?
And so it's essentially, you can see him looking at the chaotic nature of intelligence in South Africa and saying, not in Britain, not on my watch. I'm going to put this shit to order. And I'm going to get the legal framework to do it. And the Official Secret Act is still in place from 1911, is still in place in Britain. And if they can still try people as spies under that act.
Well, isn't that the case, though? We have several laws in place with the Alien and Sedition Acts.
Yes, that's right.
So, I mean,
Correct.
we can't act like the UK is the only place that has those, considering we very much use similar type of.
Oh yeah, I'm not making a moral judgment about it being wrong or right to create.
No,
this.
I just think a lot of people, I could picture listeners thinking, "Oh, look at them."
Listeners are going to, yes, and they shouldn't.
No, oh my God, the United States has alien acts that are infinitely worse. I mean, in the 1920s, they basically outlawed any kind of immigration from anywhere besides Europe. And that held sway until 1967 or something.
Seriously.
I guess what Kara's trying to point out is, because it will come up, glass houses, y'all.
Again, I feel a Blazing Saddles reference coming in, where all the guys all these railroad workers is just a piece of land to call their own, and they're like, no, and they're like,
yeah, no,
except
yes to no, except for he's going to be proved to be right in some cases and wrong in others. So I mean, it's a tricky area, Bethany.
Very interesting to me.
It's Hedy Lamarr. Lamarr.
Hedley.
Oh my God, yes.
Hedy. No, it's Hedy Lamarr. I did an entire appearance on Potaskew about Mel Brooks. I think everybody is well aware at this point.
That's one of the reasons I'm your infinite #fanboy. Is because of your deep Mel Brooks.
Oh.
#Deep Key Thursday.
Deep Key Thursday. And
Deep Key Thursday. Look it up. It's a thing.
Deep Key Fanboy with an I. And Streets with a Z.
Streets with a Z.
Oh, I knew you were going to do that.
I think, I think that you can see the lessons, I hope, from the journey we've taken, that you can see the lessons Churchill was posed with about the evolution of military intelligence in his youth and how it sort of got him. And this is all up just to the First World War. And again, we can talk about the real importance of the learning about guerrilla fighting for the Second World War, but the other things I think he learned and implemented even before the First World War ever took place. So, and these things come to much later in his life in a much bigger way. But we can see these early seeds and the importance of Churchill's relationship with intelligence, really as early as 1911.
Really,
what's
I'm
crazy-
kind of pumped about. Oh, go ahead, Bethany.
Sorry, I was just gonna make a comment. What's interesting to me is knowing when he does during World War II, having more in-depth conversation of what he did during this one, kind of puts it into a little bit more perspective, I guess.
Well, I think Churchill as a correspondent, a soldier, and in some ways a bit of a spy is more interesting even than his maybe less of an
I like the
impact,
war
but definitely
correspondent hat
more
for him.
interesting. Yeah,
Well, he was
I
definitely
do
more.
too.
He was definitely more in the shit, but like not like. I mean, yeah, obviously he did the cavalry and he had a gunfight. Like he kind of dabbled. Literally, he was your jack of all trades back then. He dabbled in a little bit of everything, which makes sense to what he became. Like
Which
Well,
is
I've always
a big part of what makes him successful later on. I think
Yeah.
you're going to. One could argue.
That's what I was gonna say. Yeah.
I absolutely agree with that. And to Bethany's point, I've always tried to argue and raise the idea that there should be a series on young Churchill's life, and it would be like half Indiana Jones, half Downton Abbey, and I think people would love it. And I've actually written a sort of not what do they call it? A treatise, not a treatise, not a screenplay, but a screen precis, which I've actually given, and maybe someday will turn into something, but we'll see.
We call
More
it.
wait.
importantly, I think we just got the pitch for you and Richard's podcast.
We call that fan fiction. Okay. Let's just call it what it is. Okay.
That timing was brilliant.
That was good. That's true.
One thing I'm very glad. I think this is an excellent follow-up companion series to you. The first series you did. I think it goes very well as a follow-up. As always, I'm pumped about that. But as we know, and as our listeners know, I'm deeply mired in Nancy Wake, and we're about to get to why this exact shit and what Churchill is talking about forming planning is going to be important to the story of one Miss Nancy Wake. So
It's
I'm
almost
actually
like you should have had him
glad.
on Nancy Wake.
It's almost as if I should have had Warren Docter on Nancy Wake. But he's so fancy and important, listeners.
I'll come
see
talk
my
about
hand
anything.
up. I see my hand up.
Oh, your hand is up.
Okay, so I have a comment to make back with the signal stuff. So I'm not sure if you've seen it. I'm sure you probably have. But 1917, one of the most critical moments in that movie is when he is trying. You can't hear me, can you?
I can hear you. Keep going.
Oh, sorry. So one of the most critical moments, spoiler alert, in 1917 is when he's trying to get them to stop the attack. And when he's trying to communicate and they keep saying, oh, he's down the line. And when he finally communicates the message, you have leadership not wanting to stop or believe the communication that's coming across. And I'm just thinking of that really representative with what you were talking about, kind of like the new versus the old, right? Like you have your
I
people
think
that were
that's
just
actually a very good example. And I mean, it's one of the things I think that people today have a hard time conceptualizing, because right now, if we're in a battle, I can text my commander and tell him what the situation is.
It's seriously a bad case of telephone. Like it really is. Like hey, you start out with a phrase and it just, as it goes down, it becomes something like, no, that's not real. Like I'm not listening to that. That can't be the true thing that came down the line. Because I'll be contagious, but
no. And I think that's you're absolutely right. And one of the that's one of the recurring tropes in World War I movies. So if you look at Mel Gibson's movie Anzac, about the Anzac landings at the Dardanelles, You
Never.
can see he's
oh,
also
spoiler
a
alert!
runner.
We're going to be talking about that with Thomas,
Well,
our Kiwi friend.
Hashtag, I'm going to ruin this for you. The end of that movie, basically, you have the same process. He's a runner. He tries to get the information there. They don't listen, and as a result, a lot of people die. And that was a reoccurring thing that happened in the First World War, but it was also a major problem in the Boer War. And just because of the mismanagement, certainly under Buller, less so afterwards. Once they got rid of Buller, things started to improve. But in part, the way it was improved was horrendous. I mean, Horatio Kitchener putting innocent women and kids in concentration camps because they were honestly trying to support the Boer movement. It led to some really awful stuff. But this
Glass
miscommunication.
houses, Americans, though. Glass houses.
Oh yeah. Oh my God. Yeah.
Seriously, I feel like I've been saying this with every guest we've had recently because we've, gone deeper into history than, what's currently.
Deep into history. I see. We're bringing Arjun back in. Okay.
Anyway, what I'm trying to say is it's what I wanted to say was just I feel like I've said this on every episode of late. Maybe it's just because of the time periods we've been in, which really doesn't take much, but I am so glad I was not born in this era as well. Like this one, the one before, the one after. This is just absolutely insane to me. And I still have a hard time wrapping my head around what was in people's minds. And I feel like I've said this before a million times and a half, but it's a lot of big dick energy. Watch me take over this land because I can. I'm sorry. I'm just struggling.
There's no concept of the United Nations at this point. Remember, Bethany? It's every
League of Nations
nationalist.
doesn't even happen until World War I.
It's every nationalist bullshit belief for itself. And again, America, glass fucking houses. If you know anything about the brothers.
I would also say that Victorian conceptions of masculinity have a lot to
Yes.
answer in this.
Thank you.
Well.
I'm glad you
Yes,
tied
yes.
that in because I wanted you to touch on that, how I guess that would have played a role, if you will, in what we were just discussing. How you had the old and the new as far as intelligence is concerned, and wanting to act on new forms of intelligence and actually, budget it, which would have been nice. Do you think there was any kind of psychological reason why they wouldn't have taken it seriously?
Well, I think that there's, one of the arguments that you come up with in this is that in the Victorian sort of conceptualization of how one wages war, this is really seen as something that it's not gentlemanly warfare. And so you're not really supposed to do this. And you get this, there's a real turning away. I mean, I'm going to piss some people off here. Basically, you have a situation in Europe where von Clausewitz writes on war, and everybody reads it, and everybody wages war that way. And von Clausewitz hated intelligence because he thought intelligence was useless on the battlefield, and that things will have changed by the time the person gets the information, and that it was probably unreliable in the first place. And that sets the stage for all military thinking really until the First World War, in my opinion.
Oh, wow.
But you also see those rhymes of gentlemanly, quote unquote, warfare again in the Second World War, specifically in the way that people initially approach the Pacific theater, if you will. It's not a European, it's not the same thing. So you see that kind of recurring throughout. Yeah. See that recurring theme throughout history. What is gentlemanly? What is not? But the reality is there's nothing gentlemanly about war.
Absolutely. I mean,
I would argue that wasn't really there in Europe then either, with how the Germans and Russians treated certain ethnic groups. But
no,
yeah, but that's I mean,
but that's not how they treated soldiers.
Exactly.
But
that's not. Those are different things.
Those are different things. How they treat somebody that they view lesser in a populace or in a civilian situation was not the same as they may have treated soldiers. And to that point, I would say that goes out the window in the Pacific. That I think the Pacific Campaign is the death of what we believe is gentlemanly behavior in war. And you see it very much here, which I think is interesting because it's like the slow death march of what is perceived honor, which never existed in the idea of warfare, but it's a very like imperialist sort of notion to me that I find very interesting.
Well, in terms of, I mean, just to answer that, I mean, for me, and maybe this because I'm just an old Southern boy, but the death of gentlemanly warfare is Sherman's March to the Sea.
Oh,
right,
yes.
I mean, no, I know that, but I mean, he excels at war because he doesn't listen to any conventions about war, and he's like, I'm going to salt the earth. You know,
I'm the first person that's there and will tell you I'm a great lover of Sherman. He has a very fucking Roman approach to fuck this noise. I'm done doing this. Here's what we're gonna do.
Yes,
we're gonna
Kara.
end this shit.
Yes, Kara.
Kara's got a
Kara's hands up.
question.
Oh, so my question, it comes down to terminology, right? Because when we talk about civilians and we talk about soldiers, how did early intelligence work? Did people dress like civilians or did they dress like soldiers? Because I feel like that's a distinction in how they would have been treated when they are captured. Does
That's
that
a
make
great
sense?
question, Kara.
So, it is an excellent question, and it number one, it depends on what type of intelligence operation we're talking about. So, for instance, a lot of intelligence operations, in fact, the majority of intelligence operations that would have involved trying to quote unquote pass, would be colonial operations. Again, in India, there's a fantastic book. Everyone here probably knows who John Buchan is and has probably read or at least seen the Hitchcock movie, The 39 Steps. There is a sequel to The 39 Steps called Green Mantle. Green Mantle is a John Buchan book about a man. I know that you haven't, Bethany. I can see Bethany's out. But Green Mantle's
but I'm here. Cool. Yeah.
Meanwhile, I got deep excited, just so we can say.
Green Mantle's a hugely important book because
Nerd.
Green Mantle's a hugely important book. It's published, I think, in 1914. And John Buchan wrote it. And in it, a man passes as an Arab trying to lead a revolt against the Ottoman Empire. And it turns out the man who's passing is a British statesman who works with a guy named Richard Henney, who's the sort of hero of the book. Now, if that doesn't sound like T.E. Lawrence to you, I don't know what does. And what's really
no joke
is John Buchan was brought in to lead the propaganda, the Ministry of Information Department in the First World War. And he's working with people like T.E. Lawrence, giving orders to people like T.E. Lawrence. So, you know, you have this situation where intelligence and fiction, I mean, this is one of the interesting things when you study intelligence. How intelligence is represented, even as early as pre-World War I stuff, has a huge psychological effect on how good intelligence can be. So anytime, this is one of the things that really fascinates me about intelligence. Anytime you go see a Bond movie, you're a part of the process. Bond is a propaganda tool, right, for British services. It's one of the greatest recruiting tools that they have. Anytime you watch a film or read a book, say Kim Philby's memoirs or whatever, you are stepping into the arena and you become a part of the game. And I think that's remarkable. So any fictionalized representation of intelligence is almost as important as the intelligence gathering operation itself, its representation. So to go back to, I know that this is far afield of your question, Kara, but I'm just illustrating that it's different if it's colonial and that most passing operations typically were colonial, but you still had people putting on the uniform the other way and trying to act, particularly if they had command of the language, trying to pass themselves off or potentially being double agents. That kind of stuff exists. Yes, Bethany, I feel like you're.
Yeah, because I did look him up, and he's wearing something that's traditionally viewed as
Wait, did you look up T. Lawrence?
T.E. Lawrence.
Yeah.
Bethany, you may know that name better as Lawrence of Arabia.
Lawrence of Arabia. So yes, he is wearing culturally appropriated garb. That's another discussion.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I was
No. It's a good, trust me, it's a good whole episode within itself to talk
And we
about.
could,
me,
we could
Lord.
easily do that, by the way.
I actually, based on your first series, I've had a lot of questions about T. Lawrence, so I would love for you to come back and just do.
I'd be interested
Him
just to
alone.
listen because I feel like I'd be listening to a lecture and I'm excited.
I feel like
I've
I
also had a lot of questions from your first series about, and you and I both know you're gonna get history hard for this, Blunt. So
oh God, yes.
both
Could we do an
great.
episode on Blunt? I would jump to the moon if I could.
Yeah, if you'll just do your article, I think that would be fucking great, actually.
Yeah. With the article about Churchill and Blunts. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
I mean, you can do that. You can incorporate anything else you want to do into it. But I thought that was a particularly good article.
his Blunt.
Not that I'm not a fan of all
Would-
of the Doctor's writings.
would
but,
someone-
Like
Would
Churchill.
someone be prosecuted more with
yeah.
like wearing, okay, if somebody gets captured, okay, and they're carrying messages, what regardless if it's intelligence, counterintelligence, okay, if they're in civilian clothes, would they be treated
No.
okay,
They're fine.
so they're similar to the John Andre in the Revolutionary War issue, then they're treated and hung like a spy, but if they're in uniform,
That's correct.
Oh
Okay.
my God, Kara, you were so far ahead of me. I was gonna say the Andre or the Andre.
oh, you know
problem.
he's my historical hottie, so
You know,
I
Kara
had
and
to-
I have the same historical hotties, listeners. Just
All
so
of
we
them.
all
It's
know,
the same list.
John
It's
Andre
the same
is
list.
heavy on that list.
The Gentleman's Spy.
But I think that raises a really interesting point. And earlier on, Jessica said this, and she was right. There's no sort of international law governing any of this stuff. So, if you were, because it was ungentlemanly to be a spy, if you're caught being a spy, death. That's pretty much an accepted norm across the board, whether you're in civilian clothes or not.
There's no waiting to be traded at that point in
Yeah.
time in history,
I
I suppose.
just look up your Andre or John Andre that you guys are all like having a hottie crush on. Was he hanged or something?
Yes, he
Yes.
was hanged
Spoiler
as a
alert.
spy. Spoiler alert,
Next
we're not
week
going to
when we
get
talk
into
to
that.
spy
We're going to have an
stories.
episode on John
He
Andre.
is not. He is on my not list. Sorry, you guys have
No, Jessica, I'm about to rage.
Get away
and
from
you-
me. Get away from me. Get away from me.
No. First
Be
off,
gone.
it depends on the portraiture. Number two, never mind. I can't. Nope.
We're not going to get into Andre right now. We're talking about
No,
Churchill.
but
Andre's
Was
his
Churchill a
whole-
little bit of a babe? Let's look up some early Churchill pics. Jessica.
Oh, young
Let's
Churchill
some
was
early
delicious.
Churchill.
Him on that
Wait,
Yeah, I
horse.
think-
historical hottie rating. We have to get numbers from all four.
I give him a freaking young Churchill's a 7. I would have climbed all over that.
Shit, damn.
Hey, can you look up young Wilford Blunt and tell me if he's better than Churchill, please?
Hold
Yeah.
on.
He's pretty delicious. I'm sorry. He is.
There's some young Winston Churchill. Okay, so then the next one is who Blunt?
Look up Wilfred S. Blunt.
And you'll see he was one of the first photographed people in Britain.
He was,
Oh my god.
also out of his goddamn mind, but in the best way.
Oh my god, this one of his beard is legit. Like, please.
Yeah, he's delicious.
What's
Right?
this?
He's the hashtag history daddy.
What's the
Can
one
I
with
just say Churchill looks like a receiver but not a giver? That's all I gotta say. So it'll be a 6.
Oh no, I'm gonna give him a 7 because I think he's a low key giver. A receiver, definitely, but I think
He's
it's
a
a
power
low key
bottom.
giver.
He is a
the
power
fucking
bottom.
Power bottom.
He would
Yes.
totally be. Yep, he would be on the bottom, but just out of laziness, to be
Why-
honest, inconvenience.
Like he's
What?
the kind of horse that's gonna ride you, if we're gonna put it in like those kind of terms.
why does the modern day, like, I'm assuming, drawing of Wilford Blunt look like, I don't know, Newt Scamander, like on Fantastic Beasts? Compare.
It
Like,
does not look like Eddie Redmayne. Not at all.
But if he did, I'd be all on
At
board.
least he faces the camera or the portraiture, unlike Eddie Redmayne. But no, I would very much love that, Warren, if you wanted to come back and do T.E. Lawrence, and then if you wanted to come back and I would actually like Blunt before Lawrence, because I want to,
I love it.
Yeah.
Lawrence.
because
Can
I
we
think
get
that's
another
the
part
next
2?
Yeah. I think that Blunt's the next logical step off of what we've talked about as far as understanding imperialism and an early sort of spycraft. I think that's probably the next step, is to do all your work on Blunt, and it ties in heavily to the period that we're talking about and what we've talked about with you so far, and then follow up with Lawrence. I would actually love that.
That makes really good sense to me. I really like that. I would love to do that.
Yeah, because I do feel like I have a lot more. I was gonna say a few more, and my mouth literally was like, no, a lot more questions about just about other figures you've mentioned. So I would love to have you back and pick your brain.
Oh, and
Well,
dive
in
more
a
beyond
way-
signals even.
Yeah, in a way, I think Blunt kind of ties into that low-key spycraft in a way, thing that we're talking about here. Not spycraft, but low-key intelligence. Wittingly, unwittingly. I very much, when you look at his life and his different roles that he played, I mean, what he may or may not have been, undoubtedly he contributed. And I mean, his views are surprisingly opposing, which I find so interesting about the guy. But yeah, I think it definitely ties into what you've just talked about here. I think the next logical step, based on what you talked about before in your series, this ties directly into it, then I think we should very much talk about Blunt.
Yeah,
because it has an effect on Churchill, obviously, both of them.
Churchill, Winston Churchill. Da-da-da-da.
Are you doing the final countdown?
I meant
Yeah,
to do
she is.
James Bond song.
She's joking us.
I don't know what happened, but you got the gist.
Actually, there were a few different things, because there is some stuff I texted you about the other day that I was looking into that I think you're probably more qualified to talk about when we get into true spycraft. I won't say the name of a certain gentleman that kind of makes a disappearance when there's a certain figure in Britain and a certain sub that's below water. So there are a couple different things I want to talk to you specifically about that I was going to write up myself that I think that you're far more qualified to speak to.
Jessica, was that your terminology to avoid Bethany Googling something?
Yeah, it was, because I don't want her to Google it. I want her to be completely surprised.
See, and that's the thing, Bethany, you ruin it if you Google it.
But that's why I did that. You could have done a hand check. My hands are not on the computer. Okay. I'm not.
It's also for our listeners, because we have 30% of listeners that when I said the name would instantly know who the hell I was talking about. And then 70% are going to try to Google it. And I don't want anybody to. I want it to all be a blessed and wonderful surprise.
Here's the thing about the 70%ers. Until you continuously talk about it and everything, it's gonna you need to literally thoroughly confuse us before we finally look it up. Okay, so I wasn't there yet, so that's why I didn't. That's
my absolute goal. Like maybe Warren should have probably been on the SOE. Maybe I'll rope him into the later date Nancy Wake stuff, especially
hell yeah, we're going to.
Now that we've crossed the Pyrenees, and this next episode is going to be a bit dull like the others, but it's laying a groundwork for who Nancy very much becomes, and that's going to tie in.
Half my questions would be, Warren question.
Well, it's going to tie into everything that Warren knows, unfortunately, and I'm not going to be able to answer about fucking half of those. So that
I'm
might
gonna
be
be a real
something
bitch.
if you were open to being on Nancy Wake 4 and 5. I might need your help.
You mean 3?
Warren.
Yeah, I'm happy to help. I'm here for it.
Apparently,
Okay.
there's 3, 4, and 5 now.
You know I
Three's
got your
been
back,
written.
girls.
I know
And
you got back. Sorry,
really
guys.
hyped.
Like I said, I dive too deep. It happens. I like to get
No, I have
deep
so many
into
more
history.
Oh, Jessica, you did it too. Both you and Bethany.
I
have
did
more
it
references.
because I love Arjun, and I have to plug Arjun since he's going to do our Ides of March episode.
Oh,
Like
don't
the
spoil
champ,
it now.
so-
Some fuck's gonna recruit him.
The hell they are. Ours will still be better. So what we've done with our last few guests, Warren, is we like to know, usually podcasts, but I know it's not your particular thing. Somebody's work you're reading, somebody's something that they've written, like an article, or maybe a podcast you've listened to that you're a big fan of their work right now, something that you've very recently gotten into.
Very good question. So it's interesting, just because we've been talking about T.E. Lawrence, this is fresh in my brain, and annoyingly, hold on, I'm going to look it up because I don't remember the title of the book. So I'm not. This isn't the greatest answer in the world, but because I have to review it, and I've been reading it. Let's see. It's just come out.
If it's what I'm thinking, like made its way to my reading list.
What can you get? What's the? It's like, it's sort of like Lawrence on War or something like that.
Yes, I don't know. You may have to Google it because I know what you're talking about, but I couldn't tell you
And it's a really interesting. So it's a really interesting book, and I'm reviewing it at the moment. It's fascinating because what makes this interesting. I mean, every other brother's written a book about T.E. Lawrence because he's sort of endlessly fascinating.
Lawrence
like
of Arabia on War, the Campaign in the Desert, 1916 to 1918. Nope.
Wait,
That's
no,
not
say
it.
that title again. Sorry.
I don't think that's it. Lawrence of Arabia on War, the Campaign in the Desert, 1916 to 1918.
Yes, that is it. That's
it.
correct.
Yes, it
Yeah.
is it. Okay.
That sounds like an interesting read.
And what's really interesting about it is that most books about T.E. Lawrence look at T.E. Lawrence because there's all this like closeted homosexuality, and that's clearly going on, and he's clearly weird. Or there's the literary studies about 7 Pillars of Wisdom, and everyone tries to come at it like biographically, right? And what this scholar has done, and this is what's innovative, is just like, look, I'm not even interested in him as a person. That I don't give a shit. Out. I care about what his argument is around guerrilla warfare and
Like,
how you utilize.
It purely focuses on his literal campaign in the desert. I feel like is probably an excellent title. It's just purely about, it's not about the person itself. I agree. It's
Exactly. And so I think it's a really, I'm going to say, refreshing approach because it's not, bogged down in all this, because half the stuff Lawrence said isn't real. And all of it, it's unclear exactly how much was that Lowell guy making it up for the American audience and how much is T. Lawrence and, what exactly he was up to. Nobody knows for sure. Nobody's going to know because the people who are there watching, like Richard Meinhardshagen, were also liars. And so you have a whole...
Sorry, it just feels like a Team Edward, Team Jacob moment right now. I'm sorry.
Jesus fucking Christ. Okay.
I mean, I know it's a horrible reference. I'm just trying to make it relatable here, okay? It feels incredibly
it's a lot of he said, she said kind of shit.
That's exactly what it is. That's exactly what it is. And so why this book is refreshing is because the author's like, I don't give a shit about any of that. What I care about is what he actually said about warfare and what he did in war.
wow.
Oh, look at us. Same fucking shit in our reading list. La-ti-da.
Oh.
Aw. Okay, so I want to know, Kara, what's something you're very into right now?
I got two really good ones. A History of Italy, which is terrific, and it's such a fucking great way to listen to. Honestly, Warren, listen to it. It's really good. He lives in
He's
Italy.
really good. Yeah,
He's just really good at presenting sources in such both the. So basically, he does it chronological. He'll have like bonus episodes where he throws in something modern, and he chronicles it from like the fall of like, I would say, the Roman Empire. I mean, he dabbles in it, but like where it really picks up to me is like your early, like your Dark Ages period, in quotes I put, because it's a time period I've never dabbled into, and hearing him just he has such humor in such a witty way. Like he doesn't have to be overt. Like he's just he's subtle. He's like you. He's an understatement kind of person.
I call it his Western Rome question mark period that I really enjoy.
Yeah. I also really like, there's a podcast called It's a Continent. And basically, the two hosts, they take different stories from countries in Africa and they examine why it's important to talk about these stories and not collectively write about Africa as a continent, which is a huge problem. It's something that's still, I think, a major problem, because if you go into a Barnes and Noble, I guarantee you're going to see a section for Europe, specific countries within Europe, and then you get to Africa and you have these giant, like, if you're lucky, books pertaining to it, but it talks about it as a continent. And so, for example, they talk about Mugabe with Zimbabwe, they talk about Sankara, they talk about Angola, they talk about South Sudan and the forging of it as a nation. It's just really things that we don't think of.
It's not like a sweeping history of colonialization.
No, they're easily, and I want to clarify, these are like 30-minute episodes, and there's something that are really easy to get into. Like you can play this, play an episode, and it'll make you actually probably end up researching inadvertently and going into a deep rabbit hole, but it's a good way to like kind of brush up on very relevant history and very recent in many cases.
Not only that, but we have a listener now and a follower that's from Africa that's taken Kara and I to school on several different misconceptions that we both have. I think.
Yes.
Yes, actually been very, very good for both of us, and something I've been very into. I think it's a lot of great insight, and that's something I appreciate as well. Bethany, are you listening or reading anything that's historically relevant?
I know what she'll be reading soon.
But I'm so proud, guys, of Bethany watching Sakara, and we will be talking about it on Patreon because Bethany got deep into it, and I want to talk about it with her, and we're going to
deep
do
into
it.
that too.
Honestly,
Deep in that. Fisted that too.
It's a little dusty in that too.
Honestly, I feel like that's all I've talked about on these last episodes is like the fact that I've watched a video of historical content. Hold on. And honestly, I've already forgotten a majority of it, because, my brain needs to process everything else that we've been discussing historically, and with everything going on in present day is also like, wait, what? Anyway, I would love to actually do something, and we could totally let our listeners know that I would love to do a live reaction to some of these historical videos that I know nothing about, because I made the mistake, because Jessica, you recommended my gym days, where I go and work out and look at hot guys. Anyway, I decided to watch a subtitled video of tombs and digging them up. And let's just say I was like, what? On the treadmill, okay? And the person, like, safe distance away with a mask on, okay? Did like a snap neck, like You okay, bitch? And I'm like,
Bitch, why are you being weird on the treadmill or the elliptical?
sorry. They just discovered this guy, and I'm pretty sure it's not even his tomb. Spoiler alert. Like, hello, drama. I'm like, here for it. And I'm like, oh, sorry. I forgot where I was for a second.
My favorite thing in the world is to watch Bethany watch docs. Like, it's just the best thing in the world. So I'm very excited. Once we're through with having a guest a fucking night, we're definitely going to get to that. You know, when we have a life again, guys, which won't be till the end of March.
April.
I actually have something that's going to be relevant to a guest we have on, because I was talking with the host today. Again, Cauldron Podcast, but it's going to be Josh that we're going to have on in a few weeks for a Napoleonic War series. Actually did a really great appearance on that, and I am not going to spoil it. It's the 2 episodes at the top of the Cauldron Podcast feed that I think are fucking excellent. This is a fun podcast that they go through history battle by battle. It's not chronological. It's just really cool, like, moments in history that are specifically, and more than that, I love that it's not about goddamn World War II, because if I have to hear one more fucking thing about the Second World War, I'm just gonna
like not
I
right. And not gonna lie, from if you're from my historical side of things, it's a lot to take in. But yet they both Josh and Jimmy take us on a pretty educational, not realistic, like relatable journey on things that I never thought I would actually be interested in ever. So it definitely, I can't wait to.
All Bethany knows about Napoleon is I get real dramatic on fucking Waterloo Day, is what I call it in my house, when I like slink around like on Napoleon in exile, which is just an excuse for me to get drunk and lay around and be a dramatic, really.
And meanwhile, I'm more like, I'm not a huge fan of Napoleon. I genuinely, like, I'll be open about it. Like, I can recognize the significance in him, but I'm not a fan.
How dare you?
I don't even care. I don't even care if you like him or not. I'm just here for the fact that that is your emotional connection to alcohol, and I support that. I'm here.
Wait, you support the alcoholism? That's what I'm hearing.
Certainly supports mine. But I just want to plug that again. Go listen to the last 2 episodes of Cauldron Podcast, and I'm not going to spoil any of it because I don't want to spoil any of it. I want you to kind of be surprised when you go in. But somebody that's going to be a guest on our podcast in a few weeks is on an episode there, and then it's followed up by content on the battle itself. And I was I'm not easily impressed, but I was pretty fucking impressed. Let me put it that way. I went into it expecting not to be, and I was kind of blown away by what he brings and what he brought for Josh. So I was really into that. That being said, Docter, which
Get it right, just get it right.
Yeah, perfect. Fucking
Degree
Doctor Doctor. Where do people follow you? You.
A slow pan.
Sorry, listeners, so you know, he floated to his wall of fucking disgusting fancy pieces of paper in frames, which I call his multiple degrees. And
I love how slow it was. It was just like a slow,
again.
Oh,
it was a slow. Oh, Jesus, Warren. This is why he will always remind you, ladies and gentlemen, if you get in a battle with him, he is the fucking authority, as we all know. He's the authority.
The arsonist has shaped feet. Like, I'm sorry. Side note, I swear to God, Warren, I would have went to the jury and defended that the anchorman said ostrich, and you proved me wrong. So the degrees stand in my book.
That's what I call an inseparable know-it-all. Just so all of you know, we were doing audio warm-ups to be ridiculous before, and Warren proved Bethany wrong on an audio warm-up even. He's just got to be right even then. So Warren, go ahead, plug your book again, and I dare you to remember what's after the colon, but go ahead and give us the main title.
It's Winston Churchill in the Islamic World, Orientalism and shit like that.
What is it, Kara? Because you have the book.
I have it in my actual hands right now.
Yeah.
Is it imperialism, Orientalism in the Middle East?
Did you actually leave out an entire word of your title?
Yeah, you left out entire.
I'm cracking up.
Okay.
So
fine.
Churchill in the Islamic World, Orientalism, Empire, and Diplomacy.
I left out
Middle
diplomacy.
East.
Oh.
Which makes me giggle.
Which I might add is rather a key part of your book, sir.
Yeah, it is.
Actually an instrumental part of the book, but yeah, no, I'm excited about it. I got it.
No,
Christmas,
it's I'll plug it as somebody that's read it. Guys, it's highly relatable, highly readable. It's very
highly
succinct,
relevant.
but highly relevant right now, if you will. I think if you want to understand a lot of what's going on in the Middle East, this is probably where you start. But also very readable, relatable. Warren's very succinct. It's not flowery horseshit, and it's definitely not to like tug his own member like a lot of academic works tend to be. It's going to be something. It's going to be something that you very much enjoy. And you're not going to be bored by. I can't suggest it enough. That being said, now that I have like verbally blown you enough, Doctor, give us where it is that we follow you at.
Can you follow me at Warren Docter on Twitter or Warren Docter on Instagram if you just want to see my face? Lots of pictures of my face.
If you can watch him being pretentious in real time, which is a lot of fun.
And beautiful scenery, actually. I will reiterate, if you want to see some beautiful landscape scenery.
He is getting quite good at photography, which he does not need like any further top off. But
like,
yeah, I would
he
agree.
has 3 notches in his belt. Like, Warren, like, slow down, man. Okay, like, right? Like, how many holes do you need, sir?
All the holes. I need all of them.
Need them all and then some. You're the guy we don't want to virtually invite to the party because you're like, ugh, that guy.
No, Warren's cool.
No,
Thanks,
Warren
Kara. Thank you.
Yes,
all of our listeners.
Jessica, you're full of shit for teasing him because I've definitely seen like a lot more pretentious people in his position, and he likes to talk to people. Number 1. Number 2, he answers questions, and number 3, he actually listens to questions. Unlike many people, I think that reach a certain stature. So, Jessica, be nice. He's very appreciated to the Bethany and Kara's out there.
His ego just inflated 10 fucking fold. There'll be no dealing with him tomorrow. Why would you do that?
It's going to eat you all alive.
It will. It's like an Alan Moore Swamp Thing, only the ego version. And now you just fucking fed it, Kara. My God, what have you done?
No, but everyone that's on Twitter, follow him. He is a blue check mark, and you will miss out on some pretty cool hashtags if you don't follow him. Which I might add, for all Jessica's bullshit, she totally participates in it. So don't make you think she's innocent in the ego feeding because she's not.
I think Jessica might low key like me, guys.
Hashtag deep key now Tuesday.
Hashtag deep key like me.
Hashtag deep key like him. Also, he has some great stuff on there.
Hashtag this feels Lynchian somehow. I'm like thinking of like some sort of odd like.
It was amazing, Kara. Kara's got the deep key fucking wins on this podcast. I'm not the funny one, guys. It's Kara. Oh,
because I don't have a place to like let it out. So when I finally actually get to, it's kind of
Let it
word
go.
vomit.
so when she records, all of her hatefulness comes out. Now, Kara, go ahead and plug
Thanks.
where we follow you,
Me,
and then please do plug your own
why?
person.
I am literally
Project.
exhausted by plugging me. But
I
you
know,
can find me.
but I'm gonna make you do it every time, or else I'm gonna have to do it. And do you think that I want to do it? So
Okay,
no.
suddenly I'm assertive. So
Ready?
suddenly I feared a spinal tap. So you can
Oh,
find
that-
me on Twitter at Kara DiDamizio, and you can find me on Instagram, which I do not use very often, but for some low-key travel vibes at Kara.DiDamizio, hashtag wannabe influencer. No, but for real, you'll follow me primarily on those two. And then I also run a history community that I founded back in 2019, geared at generating history discussion for all levels of folks. So I'm talking about your casual interest people that may have developed an interest in undergrad or even high school, but never actually utilized that. Your Bethanies as well, all the way up to people that have study and utilize history in their professions and that are published authors. And what I like about it is we'll have rotating themes of discussion, sometimes broad-based, sometimes specific, like Ptolemaic Egypt. And we'll introduce people with both a mixture of info and actually sharing sources where people can find information in an accessible and educated manner. Because I think part of the battle with history is communication. And it's not that there's not enough communication on history, it's about accurate communication and presented in a manner that is user friendly and accessible. So there's two key things we focus on in Time Travel Talks: accessibility and history communication. And those intersect and develop a pretty good community, I would like to say. We haven't had any weekend long ones. We're in the process of revamping what we want to do because we have some pretty exciting stuff coming up. But I also run a Discord server for it. And it's podcast creators, authors, armchair historians, undergrads. We have a couple folks that are about to apply for their PhD. Gary's in there. I'm not sure he knows he's in there. So, and then we have Jessica that lurks. So same with Bethany occasionally. But in any case, I'm always happy to talk with people that would love to become a part of the community, because the biggest thing is, especially if you're a history content creator, we really want to amplify good content and quality content and give it an audience. And that's the other thing I'm really passionate about. So that is the end of my spiel, so to speak. So y'all plug your stuff now.
Well, and I actually, Kara, I did want to say real quick, I had the majority. Let's be honest. It's not about so much as communication. I think I would argue it's about remembering, in a sense, because we've said it before. This has actually been a motto in our podcast, is that it's not, you don't hate history, you hate the way it was taught to you, and it's the reason why it was taught to you, you don't remember. So because, and you know what? Maybe I'll retract it. It's not that I disagree. I think there's a bigger statement, like, because we don't remember, we don't communicate.
Yeah, I think that's complimentary.
Like, until something of importance comes along and we're like, wait, have I heard this before?
I think what you're essentially trying to say is names and dates are nothing. It's more about concepts, and you've learned concepts and you retain concepts very well, Bethany. I would say, and I think most people.
Right, and it comes down to the fact that I know deep down, obviously, because of the way history has been taught, that dates are important. I know this because we've had guests, talk about dates of history that I'm like, very far back. Well, yeah, very, very far
you're thinking.
And it just kind of makes you go, not saying that I should say this out loud, but I feel like I should. Like, why is it important? and then you hear what they're discussing, you hear what's happening, and you're like, wait, what century are we in again? What
No, that's important. That's really 100%
Well, no, I
important.
think that's a good point, Beth, because what you're ultimately saying is anything from early modern forward, you definitely see rhymes in our society today, and you've really picked up on early modern to current context recently.
and it kind of puts like a weird taste in my mouth only because I'm not I'm not somebody that's like, oh, history, it's relevant. Look at, I should know, it's not something that's in the forefront of my mind. So when things like this happen, it's like, I actually think that that's why I'm going to be more adamant in your Discord, Kara, is that when I have a question,
Yes.
wait,
I'm gonna
what?
cry. I'm gonna cry. I just heard the magic words. Holy shit.
Which is
When you have a question, don't ask me because I'm a dick. Go to the Discord, and everybody's happy to
Like, let
just
me tell
chime
you,
in.
Adam
Nice.
will be so happy to answer your questions. Sorry, Adam. I volunteered you, but I know
I'm gonna call
he's
you
seriously
out
a
as
resource
well,
for me
Adam,
too,
but
though.
God knows you answer fine.
and I know that you promote equality. I love saying that in your Discord, but I do sometimes feel like I'm going to ask like I said, like when I gave in our group chat, you and Jessica, we have a group chat where I said the 17s, 76 historical, that whole thing that
I was so proud of you for identifying bullshit. Can I just say that?
I
was
was too. I feel like we've done our job because you could call out bullshit.
And I was like, can somebody please tell me why I'm feeling high bullshit? Like I feel something that I've never felt before. Is it called historical awareness? Is that the name? Like, is that
awareness? It's called being informed. It's called the high of knowing what it is that real historical content. It's the high of being clever, Bethany. And now you're in that group.
Yeah, but I didn't know. So it was one of those things where when I asked the question, I was like, I need comebacks at this point. Like, I need
slip into Warren's DMs. He'll give you some comebacks.
Oh, I got comebacks.
Definitely. So I was very proud of that question, Bethany. I think we're achieving what it is that we want to achieve, both in this podcast, and I think Kara and Lee are achieving what they want to achieve.
One of
through time
one
travel
of the
talks.
Docter's students is actually in the Discord. Doctor Level.
Oh, Chris, right?
Chris, yeah.
Oh yeah, Chris Level.
He's
Yeah.
really nice. Yeah, he is actually incredibly helpful and resourceful, and also
guys,
on
just
at all
go ahead
hours.
and let's plug Fireside Chats if you have not listened.
Yes, I really love. So his big thing is Rosa Luxemburg because he complimentarily to the war correspondence bit that we talked a little bit. That's really his passion. And check out his site. Actually, give me a second because he actually is doing something right now with the pandemic. He's trying to
really
collect
quickly before we wrap
histories.
up our plugs. Let's plug.
Do you want me to go?
Level shit. As it's really good. And I feel like I forget, don't plug him enough on this podcast. And he's so massively supportive of us, but really it should be we that support him because his shit's really great and it's bar none. Like
he's an excellent historian.
And he's so nice.
He really
he's
is
so pleasant, like easy to talk to. Like if you have a question about what he's covered, because like I said, he's talked about subjects in his fireside chats that complement a little bit about what we discussed today. He's gladly happy to answer. You can find him on Twitter at Christoph Level. You can find his website, christopherlevel.com. And on there, you can actually find history fireside chats on anywhere where Spotify's, or so not Spotify, podcast are found.
Website as well. Really good website.
On his website, and this is something that I wanted to emphasize because I know he's mentioned it several times in the Discord, but he is collecting submissions for accounts from people and their experience with lockdowns, with COVID-19. So he is still collecting oral histories for that. He really wants to see that. So please, please, please check out his page if you feel like, that you would want to contribute something. It looks like as of now, because I just checked, he still has it open. It's on his Twitter. It's his pinned tweet. So do check that out. It's an important project.
And I think once he's done with this project, we're going to see something that's very unique and something that's very interesting, just based on what I know about it.
Does that make you feel proud that one of your own is just like blossoming?
Well, Chris has always been excellent. I don't know if I would call him. I don't know that I ever formally taught Chris. But we were
but
part of
the same circles, yeah.
Yeah. We were in the same community, and I mean, he's a brilliant historian, and I think I have acted as a mentor to him in terms of publishing and that kind of stuff. And in fact, I don't want to give anything away, but he's working on a project for me, a written project that involves scholars in the U.S. and the U.K. The formal proposal hasn't been planted yet, but we've got together a really good network of people writing about leadership. And just to tease him a little bit, he is doing Rosa Luxemburg. So he's very excited.
I knew it.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
So anyway, we'll just have to see how that project evolves. It's still it's a slow moving beast, but it's coming together. But Chris is he's an excellent scholar and historian, and his work on newspapers was really remarkable in the Second World War.
Yeah,
what his thesis was on.
I like my comment. I'm like, he's really nice. That's like all I
want to put out for people. He's as approachable as Warren is. Feel free to ask him questions, whatever. He's highly approachable, very engaging. It's somebody that you should definitely follow and definitely engage with as well. And I feel like we haven't really plugged him enough or as much as he deserves based on his interactions with all of us. And he's a fucking sweetheart and truly brilliant and does just great fucking work. Like, can't say enough.
To give you an example of how the kind of person he is, recently on the Discord, we have somebody that's applying for a PhD program, and I had a mini panic attack. I was like, oh my God, I'm underqualified. And as an admin, I'm like racing around like, okay, who can I message? I was like, so I messaged him and I said, look, I know you helped, this person with something before. Would you mind? I know you're only if you have time, right? He said, I'd be more than happy to talk to her. And that tells you the kind of person that he is with all these projects that he would be willing to see, because this person was also having a bit of a hard time, like finding sources with the lockdowns that she was needing in her particular proposal. So I just thought that blew me away at just how kind he is. And it's a testament to that all academics are not assholes. And if that's something like if the doctor, the illustrious doctor with the certificates in front of him that we're
behind his illustrious head
and
his illustrious
beard. Doctor and Doctor
can make
level
the
tell
average
you anything.
Right, can make the average Joe feel like, somebody worthwhile. It says a lot about academics, personally.
I'm important for it. That's how
sometimes Chris moves me. Chris literally moves me to tears with how supportive he is.
No joke, I know.
Lots of I'm not gonna lie, I'm gonna get red-faced and weird about it because I'm always kind of bowled over by his kindness to a lot of
Are you crying or are you tired?
It's really great.
Me.
Both of you.
I was just wiping stuff out of my eye.
I'm sure it was.
A tear.
Oh, Chris!
Chris!
Chris, he's a great guy, and I mean he is genuinely, aside from him as a scholar, as a man, he's just a great guy and very helpful, very kind, and I'm glad he's my friend. He's definitely not an asshole like some academics. Not like me. I'm an asshole compared to Chris. And
everyone's an asshole compared to Chris.
I kind of want to give him his sainthood. Like I'm prepared to write whoever the new pope may be. But
did you just try to spoil something?
It's not to say that he's not uncritical. I mean, he'll give you the business, but he'll do it in a nice way.
Yeah,
he'll say it nicely,
but in a helpful way.
Yeah.
So all that being said, I can't I always forget to plug Fireside Chats, and it's something I legit get into hardcore parkour because I think it's great work. And we all know I'm the first person to pull down my pants and take a huge shit on academia here. It's kind of my like shtick, if you will. Present company not excluded. But that's the first thing I do. But there are real educators out there that are also clever folk like our current guests. So again, we encourage you to go find these people, follow these people, be about it. So Bethany, where do people find you?
Okay, you can find me at Bethany Skilton 5 on Instagram, all lowercase, easy, simple pie. However, if you go over to Twitter, it will be the same handle, Bethany Skeleton 5. However, please capitalize on the BS in my name, Bethany Skeleton. Okay, please capitalize on my BS because you will tag somebody and they'll be like, what the fuck? So, yes, that's it. Jessica, over to you.
Where do we find this podcast? We find this podcast at bodycountpod.com is our website. Again, guys, I'm almost finished with the new one. It's going to be different. We're going to start offering merch. We're going to start offering a lot of things that we have neglected, and a lot of you have so blessedly emailed or DM'd me about. We are also available to follow. We put a lot of shit out there during the week at Body Count Pod on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. We are massively active on all three. We're really getting into the spirit. And then if you want to follow me, we're working on some things. Maybe don't follow it yet. Body Counts or patreon.com/body counts. There are some things there you can watch back in the day before Kara joined the podcast. You can watch some shit about Russia and some different stuff and maybe some
Can
OTD.
you only imagine how much more Russia content there would have been? I'm sorry to say.
It was 15 episodes already, and I wanted to literally put my face into a blender. Can you imagine if you'd have on that? I'd still be doing Russia.
But Jessica, who learned shit and remembered shit?
Yeah, I can say Yvonne the Fourth and Yvonne the Fifth, and you actually know who the hell they are. So
who did a good job? Who did a good job at teaching their historical challenged friend? Who did a good job?
Challenged. I'm done.
It also got me my favorite email of all time, that your knowledge of early modern history is shadowed by your general ass clownery. So we've always called ourselves ass clowns since. And also, I got to send back my favorite email reply of all time. Joke's on you. I'm a terrible early modern historian. So it was a lot of fun. That's why we say we're ass clowns.
Funny.
One of my favorite emails of all fucking time. Thank you for thinking I'm good at early modern, because you are desperately fucking wrong, sir. That being said, that's going to do it for us this week. Obviously, we're going to have Warren back because he's a fucking fan favorite, and I have to hear all the time about
Hashtag body count.
Jess, what about you? Where can people follow you? Don't forget about you.
B is in Bravo, manner is in the house, not the behavior, Twitter and Instagram. You guys know where to find me. Fuck. God knows my DMs say you know where to find me.
I Twitter stalked you.
You know what's funny? I
Twitter
have not got any bad DMs lately.
So,
no bad DMs, y'all. I just want to say for the record, and I don't want to jinx myself, but unlike you ladies, I have not received any sultry images. And I'm not saying I'm disappointed. I'm just saying I was made to be under the impression that I'd have some interesting DMs.
You know what? I've only had praise recently in both email and DMs, and only the occasional dick or tit pic. Like, they've definitely gone down. Suddenly, we are, real people.
It's
Then
me.
why am
I've never had any. What am I doing wrong?
Okay.
No,
People out there,
no.
you know where to find him.
Okay, so I'm curious, why the fuck am I still getting badge pics? Like, what the hell? Come on now.
Yeah.
Like me, why am I the one getting them then? Like,
You know what? Naked pictures from fans are indiscriminate, guys, just so you know. Like, I get as many dicks as I get tits and vag, but Bethany gets more than all of us, so that's exciting. Keep
I
them
hadn't
up.
gotten any. But that's because I intimidate them sexually. I understand that.
So, you know, maybe find them on Twitter. Be kind, rewind there, if you will. Gift his DMs.
I guess pull into the dock.
Yeah. Docs the dock, if you will.
I really don't want that. I would absolutely, that would be terrible. We joked around and
It'd
somebody
be filtered. It would be filtered, to be honest, because
You
Twitter
joke
does
about
filter
that,
spam.
but when this airs, when you have like 20 vagina pictures in your DMs, I'm gonna laugh so hard.
I would weep deeply.
And then I'm gonna sing "Welcome to My World" in the old school country style to you, and it's gonna be
to my world.
Yes, it's gonna be a very fitting moment. Won't you come on in, sir, if you will?
Won't you come on in?
That baritone,
So,
man.
now, guys, we've had fucking Dr. Warren Docter back. You can stop emailing me asking for this one.
He'll
to
be
come
back
on.
again.
He's gonna be back again.
Jessica,
It's like herpes. We can't get rid of him.
Jessica, I was the one sending you emails about Warren. Okay, I'm just gonna
The whole
actually
time.
bring it back.
Oh my God!
Hey,
Wait,
hey, you're
is
welcome.
that counterintelligence?
In a way. In a way.
There's a lot of
So,
CT happening here, guys.
Bethany, I
will
knew it was
also.
you.
This may actually come out before the book is out or before the articles are necessarily out, but when they do come out, we will also put that up where you can read a number of brilliant people like the doctor here talking about some really intelligence work as far as Churchill is concerned. So that being said, we will be back at you guys next week. As always, it was a massive fucking pleasure.
Thank you. Yes, it was.
To be able to bring this to you guys every week, and we will be back at you later. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.